Chapter 827. Oh. Renbochin felt like his head was going to explode. His memory stopped at the scene where Hongwu pinched his face and forced him to drink wine. He didn't know anything else after that. He couldn't say that he didn't know anything, but his memory seemed to be mixed with other things. It was as if he was sent back while he was in a daze. He couldn't remember who sent him back. He only remembered that it was a woman who had a fragrance on her body. That fragrance made him feel like he was on fire. What happened after that? Was it a dream? Renbochin opened his eyes and was surrounded by darkness. His head hurt like hell. He staggered to the table and saw a bowl of green vine soup on it. Gulp, gulp. In less than 10 minutes, Renbochin felt as though his brain matter had been glued back together using 502 glue. He heaved a long sigh and cursed, "Old B****." He inadvertently smelled the fragrance in the room again. It reawakened something in his memory. The re-visualization greatly improved his memory, thinking ability, and willpower, but the price was that he couldn't dream anymore. Therefore, the vague memory he had when he woke up was definitely not a dream. Renbochin sat on the bed and recalled carefully. There was indeed someone who sent him back. It was indeed a woman who had a faint fragrance on her body. Then, he hugged her. Kissed her. He even stretched his hands out from under the armor. The armor was quite elastic, probably because the iron plates were connected by animal tendons. Pfft. Renbochin's eyes widened and he almost vomited blood. Armor. Armor. Xianjia. The only woman in the palace who wore armor was Xianjia. What the f***ck? Renbochin was dumbfounded. Fake wine is harmful. I will sue you until you go bankrupt. If I can't win, you will be even more miserable. Do you believe that I will tear down your winery? What have I done? In an instant, Renbochin's heart rate soared to 220, and his blood pressure soared from 80 to 150 to 160 to 300. He couldn't stop even if he stepped on the brakes. With a face full of panic, he carefully recalled what had happened last night. It was still the same thing he had thought of just now. He had even grabbed 2 softballs, and the person in the dark actually did not resist. Furthermore, after he had grabbed those 2 balls, the fragrance on the body became even stronger, as if he had poured oil on the fire, and then, there seemed to be no then. It should be that step. This was probably the only heartwarming scene in this thriller. He fell into a deep sleep. That should be it. That must be it. Following which, Renbochin's face wrinkled up and became vexed. How could such a situation happen? He could only say that he had been holding it in for too long. This time, Hongwu, that old bastard, had forced him to drink too much. Furthermore, Xianjia's brain lacked some common sense. She didn't have much of an idea in this aspect. From the way she calmly came out of the shower, to the electric shock experiment, to the way she changed her clothes in front of him, this could be seen from the past. Then she probably wouldn't take what happened back then to heart, right? No one should have noticed this. Who sent the green vine soup? In the little bit of memory he had left, there didn't seem to be another person, Xianjia. Or was it sent later? Both were possible. In other words, the Empress probably wouldn't know about this. As long as no one else found out, otherwise, Renbochin thought about the Empress's reaction after finding out about this. There was a 99% chance that she would look at him coldly with eyes full of disappointment and hatred. Then, she would casually say, "Take him away and behead him. Both of his heads together. Then, imprison him under the palace to accompany his arrow." Ha ha ha, that won't happen. Renbochin laughed dryly. The Empress probably wouldn't know about this. Furthermore, was this considered a drunken gaffe? Those who don't know can't be blamed. Did he ever tell the Empress this sentence? At most, he would be considered a dead body, right? Renbochin struggled in his room for half the night. When the next morning came, he pretended to be calm and went to see the Empress to see her expression. He looked as calm as an old dog, but in fact, he was panicking. Any man who got drunk and rolled in the sheets with his wife's best friend a few days before his wedding would be panicking. Even though it wasn't his wife's best friend and they didn't roll in the sheets, the Empress wasn't an ordinary woman. If the Empress's expression wasn't good, his heart would probably race. The Empress had just gotten out of bed and hadn't combed her hair. When she saw him, she smiled and said, "I saw you drinking happily with the general yesterday." "Your Majesty, it was the general who was happy, not me. That was forcing him to drink, not drinking." Renbochin heaved a sigh of relief and put on an expression as if he had been cheated. In any case, the more he cried, the better. If the matter was exposed in the future, the Empress wouldn't blame him too much. After all, he was the victim. If the situation allowed it, he would have cursed all 18 generations of Hongwu's ancestors. It doesn't matter. I don't know why, but he always has some resentment in his heart. After forcing you to drink, the knot in his heart will be untied. The Empress smiled. The knot in his heart has been untied, but the knot in my heart can't be untied. Furthermore, she isn't his daughter, so what kind of resentment does he have? Renbochin accompanied the Empress for breakfast and then went to the academy with the guards. Not long after he left, he saw Axianjia patrolling over from somewhere else. Renbochin's heart thumped as he stepped on the accelerator again. "General Axianjia." Renbochin greeted her calmly. Axianjia pushed up her glasses, nodded at him as a greeting, and walked past him with the guards. Seeing that Axianjia wasn't acting strangely, Renbochin was finally relieved. He sniffed the air and found a faint fragrance that was the same as the one from last night. It was indeed the smell of Axianjia. It was indeed her. Fortunately, it was her. If it was someone else, he would have fallen into a trap this time. However, why was it Axianjia who sent him back last night? Or could it be that Axianjia was actually here to deliver the green vine soup last night, and what happened afterward happened? She wasn't responsible for either of these things. She was the dignified commander of the Imperial Guards. Whether it was to send him back or deliver the soup, she shouldn't be the one. Renbochin couldn't figure it out and didn't want to think about it anymore. In any case, he was safe this time. Fortunately, he was getting married in 6 days. At that time, his days of being a virgin would finally come to an end. In the future, he wouldn't let this kind of thing happen even if he went to a healthcare center or a clubhouse. After Renbochin left, Axianjia took a turn and went to patrol the palace walls. She looked at the side of Renbochin's face and blushed. Renbochin didn't guess wrongly. Last night, she went to deliver the green vine soup. When she met the female official who delivered the green vine soup, she sent her away and delivered it to Renbochin. She wanted to ask if the electric shock test was still going to be carried out. However, Renbochin was drunk and unconscious. She wanted to help him up and make him drink the green vine soup, but she didn't expect his hands to wrap around her body. It was as if they had a magical power that made her feel hot all over. In particular, when his hands pushed open the gap in the armor and reached out from below, it felt somewhat similar to the electric shock test. This feeling made her feel very strange. Chapter 828. The Emperor of the Yun Nation, Chen Dongxing, was conferred the title of Duke Anil, the only marquis in Dayo. It was the one that Lu Chan was conferred. Needless to say, this was also proposed by him. This title explained everything. In the future, he would be able to know his place, enjoy peace, and live a stable life. For Chen Dongxing, this was a good thing. At least, it was much better than the previous dynasties where the entire royal family was exterminated. When the people of the Yun Nation heard this news, they had to admit that the Empress was generous this time. This also made everyone believe that the Aboriginal style of doing things had indeed changed. The turning point for this change seemed to be the Empress's engagement 3 years ago. Since then, Deo had been slowly changing. Compared to the barbaric and savage Aboriginals of the past, such a change was a good sign for them and made many people feel at ease. Whether it was those who went to the scene to watch or those who waited at the residence, they were all relieved to know that Qindongxing had been conferred the title of Duke Anil. Then, news came that the Empress wanted to see them. It was just as Lin Mengxing had said. This was another piece of good news. Out of the 4,000 to 5,000 people, only about 400 went to the palace. They were the legitimate sons of the warlords, a few from the aristocratic families, and people like Lin Mengxing, who were the focus of attention. In addition, there was also a person called Gao Yishan. Everyone felt a little strange and didn't know where he came from. After asking around, they only knew that he came with the people from Xinyang City. Hundreds of people waited in front of the palace for the whole morning and were brought in when it was almost noon. As soon as they entered the hall, they saw a heroic-looking lady in red sitting at the top with a golden crown casually placed on the table. On both sides stood dozens of burly men and enchanting and wild women. All of them looked at them with threatening, provocative, and contemptuous gazes. The group of people immediately broke out in a cold sweat. The dozens of people on both sides were all spirit will experts. It could be said that Dayo's imperial court was the most powerful among the countries. If they were to fight with only these people in the imperial court, Dayo would dare to say, "I can fight 10 of them." After all, their country was based on knowledge and ability. In Dayo's imperial court, martial strength was the hard standard. Without enough martial strength, one wouldn't even have a chance to speak in the imperial court. Naturally, there was nothing much to say about meeting the Empress. It was nothing more than a show of loyalty. Then, the Empress encouraged everyone in a good mood, saying that a wise man submits to circumstances. As long as they stabilize the situation in the Yun nation, serve loyally, and carry out the orders of the imperial court, they would be able to sleep in peace. Ren Baqian had already repeated this a few times. Given the Empress's character, she couldn't be bothered to remember such things. However, her memory was much better than an ordinary person's. Even if she didn't try to remember, she could still roughly remember what Ren Baqian had said. After Ren Baqian was done, the Empress said faintly, "Lin Mengxing, step forward." "Your Majesty, this commoner is Lin Mengxing." "Greetings, Your Majesty." Lin Mengxing stepped forward. Previously, when he met the Empress, he had thought about whether he should say something along the lines of unifying the martial world for thousands of years. However, after thinking about it, he felt that it was better to say less. After all, Dayo was different from the Yun nation. If he said the wrong thing, it would give people a frivolous impression. It was better to keep his mouth shut. "Yes, you are Lin Mengxing." The Empress carefully sized up the young man who was about 30 years old. He had a fair face, a short beard, a handsome face, and a pair of starry eyes. Lin Mengxing could be considered a handsome man in the Yun nation. Even in Great Xia, he was extremely attractive. Unfortunately, the aesthetic standards of the Aboriginals were a little distorted. Many people curled their lips and commented, "He looks like a gigolo and is as thin as a chicken." You are a smart person. You have done a good job and made a great contribution. Although you think that the Aboriginals are barbarians, we also reward meritorious deeds. What reward do you want? If it's an official title, I can reward you with a rank 6 official rank. If it's gold and silver, I can reward you with 100,000 taels of silver. If it's anything else, I can reward you as long as I can afford it. The Empress said faintly. Now that the family was rich, the Empress was confident enough to reward him with 100,000 taels of silver. Moreover, Lin Mengxing's merit was convincing dozens of warlords to surrender. If he was in another nation, he would be rewarded handsomely and be given a noble title. However, when the Empress said this, the eyes of the people in the Yun nation turned red. After joining Dayo, the warlords of big cities were only rank 6 officials, and the warlords of small cities were only rank 7 officials. A rank 6 official was equivalent to a warlord of a big city. The Empress wouldn't let him take charge of a city, right? As for 100,000 taels of silver, it was a huge sum of money for the aboriginals, but it was nothing for the big aristocratic families, let alone the cities. I thank your majesty for your kindness. I am not keen on official positions and wealth. My teacher has recommended me to be an official many times, but I have always rejected him. I heard that there are official schools in Dayo. I wonder if I can work in one of them. With my knowledge, I should be qualified to be a teacher in any of the official schools, Lin Mengxing said calmly, looking like a scholar. Oh. Are you referring to the Black Bamboo Academy? The Empress was slightly surprised and raised her voice a little. After I came to Lan City, I have heard of the Black Bamboo Academy many times and yearned for it. I wonder if I can exchange my reward for a teacher position in the Black Bamboo Academy. I dare not say that I am knowledgeable, but I have studied the books of sages for 20 years and am competent to teach some simple disciples. Furthermore, I have wanted to be a teacher since I was young. The Empress knocked on the golden table in front of her and carefully looked at Lin Mengxing, who was standing below, as if she wanted to see into his heart. Lin Mengxing looked indifferent, and his eyelids drooped slightly. After a while, the Empress smiled and said, "Since you have this intention, I will agree to it." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Lin Mengxing cupped his hands. Then, the Empress looked at another person. It was an old man in his 60s who looked like an immortal. "You are Gao Yishan. You said that there is a treasure that can stabilize fate and allow Dayo to prosper for tens of thousands of years." The Empress asked faintly. "Yes." Gao Yishan took a step forward. Afraid that the Empress wouldn't understand, he explained the so-called fate and said, "This is an ancient treasure. After my ancestor obtained it, he kept it a secret. I am willing to offer it to Your Majesty to bless Dayo. I only hope that Your Majesty can treat the people of the Yun nation well." Gao Yishan had already deliberated carefully before coming. The theory of fate had existed since ancient times. All emperors cared about suppressing the fate of a nation. Furthermore, he said that he hoped the Empress would treat the people of the Yun nation well and create an image of himself as a compassionate person. Regardless of whether the other party completely believed him or not, it was better to believe it. "Ha, the Yun nation is already dead, and you are telling me that fate can be stabilized." The Empress sneered. "Take him away and behead him." When the guards outside heard this, they felt indescribably comfortable. They hadn't beheaded anyone for a long time. "Your Majesty, please listen to me. After my ancestor obtained this treasure, he kept it a secret and didn't offer it to the royal family of the Yun nation. He said that the foundation of the royal family of the Yun nation is unstable and can't bear this treasure. Now that Dayo has occupied the Yun nation, they have 2 places as their foundation and must use this treasure to stabilize their foundation." Gao Yishan immediately shouted. "The human race is already dead, and you are telling me that fate can be stabilized?" The Empress sneered. "Behead him." If this treasure was really that useful, would the human race have been driven here with only 100,000 survivors? These words could be used to deceive others, but not her. Did she really think that she was that easy to deceive? Many people from the Yun nation heaved a sigh of relief after leaving the palace. Although the Empress was extraordinarily beautiful, she killed without batting an eyelid, which was really terrifying. Many people looked at Lin Mengxing, who walked out from the side, strangely. He didn't want to be a rank 6 official, but instead went to an academy to be a teacher. The principal of the Black Bamboo Academy wasn't seen in the court today. From this, it was obvious that although he had been chosen as the husband, his status wasn't high. Why did he still jump into that trap? After a long time, when they returned to their accommodation, someone suddenly reacted. Lin Mingxing's move is brilliant. What do you mean? Think about it. Dayo only has one official academy. Don't you know what kind of people come from it? They are officials. Dayo isn't like Great Xia or the Yun Nation, which has many academies. There is only one such academy in the entire Dayo. In the future, all the officials from the academy will have to call him teacher. His status will naturally rise, and it won't just be limited to the Black Bamboo Academy. Come on, I heard that only those who aren't talented are sent to that academy. The only teacher is the principal of the Black Bamboo Academy. Other than him, everyone else is a student. It's clearly a place for idling around. In my opinion, his goal isn't to be a teacher, but to be that person above. Another young man pointed to the top of his head. Think about it. The principal of the Black Bamboo Academy was chosen as the husband by that person. It can't be because he is good at fighting, right? In that case, it's likely that he has some knowledge and that person took a fancy to him. Dayo is a place full of barbarians. As long as one has some knowledge, he will immediately pull away from the others. Even in the Yun Nation, aren't those famous scholars pursued by women everywhere? I heard that the principal of the Black Bamboo Academy isn't that good either. It's probably because of this that person took a fancy to him. As for Lin Mengxing, it's likely that this is his intention. Lin Mengxing looks much better than Ren Baqian, right? You have seen Ren Baqian in the crowd these past 2 days, right? He doesn't look amazing and looks like a barbarian. Lin Mengxing looks valiant, and his knowledge is incomparable. What does Ren Baqian have to do with him entering the Black Bamboo Academy? The young man had a lecherous smile on his face. His words were scorching, as if it was the truth. However, his voice was very soft. There are 6 days left until that person's wedding, someone reminded him. So what if it's a wedding? The emperor still has 3 palaces and 6 courtyards. Which one of them doesn't have many concubines? Even though that person is a woman, she might have a gigolo. Would Ren Baqian still dare to control her? Perhaps she could even replace him, and that person would rise to the top. With that person's looks, status, and strength, she wouldn't have lived in vain even if she were to become a gigolo. The more they thought about it, the more they felt that this possibility was very likely. Otherwise, why would Lin Mengxing want to become a teacher at that academy instead of a rank 6 official? If he wanted an official position, he would most likely be sent back to the Yun Nation. He would only have a chance if he stayed in Lon City. Chapter 829. Check all the equipment again. Ren Baqian was inspecting a factory on the west side of the city. On one side of the factory were several warehouses that were piled with large amounts of coal and charcoal. On the other side was a row of steel machinery. At this time, hundreds of workers were busy in the factory. Apart from that, most of the third-year students were also helping to inspect the site. As time passed, orders were passed down one by one. Light the fire. Pull the brake. When the final order was given, everyone looked nervous. This was the power plant of Lon City. After preparing for 2 whole months, today was finally the last moment. Without letting the crowd wait any longer, as soon as the switch was pulled, the street lights in the courtyard lit up almost at the same time. From near to far, from the power plant to Lon City, the light spread into the distance like a drop of dye in clear water. When the top of the city wall was lit up, the people in the power plant finally burst into cheers. Cheers filled with excitement. He had finally succeeded. Although it had been tested before, it had always been on a small scale outside the city. Today was the first time it was operating at full power and lighting up the entire Lon City. Looking at the brightly lit Lon City in the distance, everyone felt a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction. It was about 7:30 in the evening, and the sky wasn't completely dark yet. There were still many people hurrying along in Lawn City. After a busy day, the commoners had just finished their dinner and were preparing to eat, sleep, and play with their children. Suddenly, the entire city lit up. Beihong District, Julian District, Shuaboping District, Eagle Beak Cliff District, Gujiazhai District, Wadayagu District, Whitestone District, Shihu District, Yuala District, one after another dark areas were lit up. Many people did not know what was happening. They walked out of their houses and found that the top of the poles that had been erected in the past 2 months were all lit up. Each of the glass orbs was shining brightly. When Tong Jingye heard the servants shout, he walked out of the courtyard and saw that the top of the electric pole in front of his house was sprinkling light in all directions. His face immediately lit up. They had finally succeeded. "Extinguish the lanterns in front of the door," Tong Jingye shouted. Yes. As the lanterns in front of the mansion were blown out, the 2 street lamps that were 40 steps apart were enough to illuminate a large area in front of the mansion and the front yard of the mansion. All right. Good. Good. Tong Jingye stroked his beard and laughed heartily. This is the one that Lan, and the others made. A middle-aged couple walked out, a look of surprise on their faces. That's right. Follow me to a higher place to have a look. Tong Jingye laughed heartily as he jumped to a high place and looked into the distance. He saw that everything within his line of sight was lit up. People in the surrounding mansions jumped to a higher place to see the magnificent scenery of the city. The people of the city jumped to a high place to see the magnificent scenery. In the entire city, the high ground was packed with people. Everyone from the Yun nation walked out of their rooms one by one and looked at the street lights that were lit up one by one in shock. Previously, they were curious about what these vertical poles were. After asking around, they found out that they were made by the Black Bamboo Academy. At that time, everyone was secretly laughing. They didn't expect these things to light up. How many of these poles were there in Lawn City? Of Tong of the city was. Was this brightly lit city the barbarians' imperial city that was covered in dust? Most of the people from the Yun nation had been looking for a backer these days and didn't include him in their plans. Of people. Of the people. From of them. Of. After all, he wasn't Aboriginals. However, after witnessing this scene, many people wondered if they should pay a visit to the Black Bamboo Academy. Even if they couldn't rely on the Black Bamboo Academy as a backer, it would be good to learn from him how he did it. Unknowingly, the common people began to walk on the streets. The Aboriginals from other places also joined the crowd in surprise. The city, which was usually dark at night, was brightly lit at this time. Waves of cheers were heard from the crowd. There were also shouts like, "Climbing the lampposts is strictly prohibited. Violators will receive 10 lashes. Jumping on the lampposts is strictly prohibited. Violators will receive 10 lashes. Damaging the lampposts is strictly prohibited." That night, the Public Order Bureau and the Winged Cavalry were also dispatched, loudly preaching the regulations that they had memorized. At a certain street corner, a group of Jing tribe people stood there and watched with yearning in their eyes. The sound of an arrow rang out, and a beautiful girl sat on the ground with a joyful expression on her face, playing cheerful notes. She had adapted the music from the Jing tribe's music, and it had a different flavor when played with the arrow. The Empress stood on the palace wall with her hands behind her back and looked down with a faint smile on her face. This was a big deal. It was a big deal for the whole of Dayo. It was an achievement that could even make an emperor feel satisfied. "Your Majesty, it's so beautiful." Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan followed behind with stars in their eyes. Xan just stood in the dark and looked at the lights in the distance. She thought, "I heard them say that this is electricity. After receiving electricity, it can emit light. Is this also why Principal Ren's body emits light? No wonder when he touched me, I felt like I was being electrocuted. Renbochin didn't know that he was being treated as a human generator. Seeing that the street lights in the city were successfully powered for the first time, Renbochin was full of excitement. Although he was used to it on Earth, he had to do it himself in this world. It wasn't easy. He then hurried back to the palace and didn't know if the Empress had eaten. On the way back, he admired the scenery of Lawn City and finally squeezed through the crowd to return to the palace. When he arrived at the Empress's quarters, he saw a hot pot, a table full of meat, and wine bottles. "Your Majesty, it's a success. The sky is full of stars. Did you see it?" Renbochin laughed. "I saw it just now." The Empress smiled. "Your Majesty, can you give me a reward?" Renbochin leaned over and chuckled. Seeing the big bald man's expression, the Empress almost burst out laughing. She managed to suppress it with great difficulty, but she couldn't hide the smile on her face. She let Renbochin's face get closer and closer to her mouth. The gentle touch made Renbochin's heart beat rapidly. The Empress didn't mind his kisses now. After all, there were only a few days left before the wedding. Every time, Renbochin would feel like he was kissing a rare treasure. That palpitating feeling wouldn't subside no matter how many times he kissed her. Then, Renbochin was violently pushed away. The Empress raised her eyebrows and asked, "You didn't brush your teeth today?" Renbochin calmly analyzed and thought about it carefully. He realized that he had forgotten to brush his teeth today. How can that be? It might be because I ate the stinky eggs they brought at the power plant today. Renbochin looked wronged. "Stay away from me. Otherwise, I'll beat you up." The Empress looked even more disgusted. Renbochin was chased all the way to the other side of the table. The Empress glared at him a few more times before eating. Halfway through the meal, she casually said, "I found a teacher for your school." Renbochin was slightly surprised. "Your Majesty, are you talking about a teacher?" "Yes, I didn't find him. He took the initiative to go." "Do you still remember that person called Lin Mengxing, the one who convinced many warlords to surrender? I promised to reward him with a rank 6 official position or 100,000 taels of silver. However, he said that he wanted to be a teacher at the school, and I agreed." "It's him. Why does he want to go to the school?" Renbochin was surprised. He then laughed and said, "No matter what, he can go if he wants to. It just so happens that I'm too busy alone, and it's good to have another teacher. However, he has to start learning how to read." "Well, you can arrange it as you see fit." The Empress thought about it and told Renbochin about the treasure that could stabilize the fate of the nation as a joke. Renbochin laughed heartily. If there really was such a treasure, would the human race have been driven to this desolate place? Renbochin then asked seriously, "How did you deal with that person? He might have evil intentions. Earth also has feng shui and fate. It can gather and naturally disperse fate. We conquered the Yun nation, and he came to give us a treasure to stabilize the fate of the nation. No matter how I think about it, there's something fishy going on. Behead him." The Empress said faintly. Renbochin was silent for a while and smiled. "This is indeed your Majesty's style." He then mimicked the Empress's tone and said, "Take him away and behead him." Pow! The Empress used her chopsticks to hit his face with a large piece of beef. The two of them chatted and laughed. After dinner, the Empress poured him a glass of wine and said, "I will pour this for you. This is your merit for making the nights in Lawn City no longer dark." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Renbochin smiled. "Do you want any other rewards?" The Empress asked again. "Can we talk about it in a few days?" Renbochin asked with a smile. "No. You have to say it now." The Empress looked at Renbachian's expression and subconsciously felt that she couldn't agree to his request. Renbachian grinned. He wanted to bring it up on the night of the wedding, but unfortunately, she didn't agree. When we return to Earth, we still have to hold a wedding. The customs on Earth are different from those in Deo, and there are some things that your Majesty must endure. Renbachian said after thinking for a while. His hometown wasn't bad and didn't have the bad habit of disrupting weddings. However, the weddings on Earth were still different from those in this world. He didn't want the Empress to suddenly flip out because of something. Even the simplest tea ceremony would be a problem. Chapter 830. Renbachian felt that he should at least receive an award for being at work 5 days before his wedding. If he had been this diligent when he was working on Earth, he would have been promoted and married a rich and beautiful woman. Of course, he was also getting a promotion and a rich and beautiful woman now, but there was no comparison. He reckoned that there was no one else in the world who was more qualified to be addressed this way than the Empress. On the one hand, it was for the sake of the students. After all, they missed a lot of classes, and he wouldn't rest as long as he could attend classes. This wasn't an individual's case. Rather, it was a common trait among the Aboriginals. They weren't like the majority of ordinary people, who had been obliterated by life. Due to their strength, the Aboriginals had a relatively rich psychology of exploring everything. Furthermore, they had an extremely strong motivation to act. As a result, the Aboriginals were obsessed with courting death. For example, the electric poles. Even though the Public Order Bureau and winged cavalry warriors were arranged to read out all kinds of prohibitions under every electric pole in the city last night, they still couldn't be considered courting death. Last night, the Public Order Bureau whipped people from dark until this morning. It was said that 90% of the criminals wanted to climb up the electric poles to see what was on them and why they were glowing. The other 10% wanted to push down the electric poles to see if they would still light up. Fortunately, Renbachian had anticipated this situation. Well, it couldn't be said that he had anticipated it. In Lawn City, there were so many Cardinal Heaven experts and Kismet Heaven experts. These people could fly up to the telephone poles and stand on one leg. In order to prevent electric shocks, Renbachian deliberately buried all the electric wires underground. Otherwise, today's news would be that hundreds of people had been electrocuted, and the smell of meat in Lawn City would linger for at least 3 days. In any case, digging pits and burying wires was easy. The Aboriginals had great strength, and even without an excavator, they could still do the work of 10 Aboriginals. An ordinary person digging a pit that was 1 meter wide and 1 meter deep could easily dig 10 meters in a day. Within 2 months, they had dug a tunnel in Lawn City. If it wasn't for the fact that it was too late, Renbachian would have asked them to dig a sewer. The Aboriginals were full of curiosity and were full of action, and so were the students of the academy. They were curious about everything, which was an important characteristic of scientific exploration. Therefore, Renbachian still had high expectations for these students and naturally seized the time to teach as much as he could. At least, he felt that he was quite qualified to be a teacher. Other than the students, it was also because someone was coming today. Renbachian saw him at the entrance of the school. He was dressed in plain embroidered clothes, had a bun on the top of his head, a pale face, a short beard, sword-like eyebrows, and starry eyes. He was just a little less skinny than Renbachian when he was younger. Since he was waiting here early in the morning, he must have inquired about the time he would arrive. Lin Mengxing pays his respects to Principal Ren. Lin Mengxing calmly greeted him. Renbachian was sizing him up, and he was also sizing him up. He had a big bald head and his build was similar to that of the Aboriginals. He had big shoulders, a round waist, and a fierce-looking face. Actually, he looked more delicate than the Aboriginals. After all, his foundation was there. Even if the husky had grown fat, it would not look like a Tibetan Mastiff. Yes, you are Lin Mengxing. Come in with me to talk. Ren Baqian looked her up and down and said faintly. After bringing Lin Mengxing into the office, Ren Baqian sat on the chair and casually took out the gun to fiddle with. It wasn't to intimidate Lin Mengxing, as Lin Mengxing didn't know what it was. It was just a small habit. When he first came here, he relied on this thing to save his life. Although he didn't need it now, he would take it out and fiddle with it every time he sat here. It was just like someone holding two walnuts in their hands. I heard from Her Majesty that you want to be a teacher here. Before we talk about anything else, please satisfy my curiosity. Why did you want to come here? Ren Baqian asked casually. Lin Mengxing stood in front of the table and smiled. If I said that I wanted to teach and educate people since I was young, would you believe me? What do you think? Ren Baqian looked at him playfully. Teaching and educating people could be done anywhere. Why did he have to come here? Lin Mengxing changed his tone and said, they guessed my various motives, and some even guessed that my target was Her Majesty. At this point, Lin Mengxing paused and seemed to be observing Ren Baqian's reaction. It had to be said that he was quite courageous to stop at this point. If it were someone else, he might have been dragged out and beheaded. Ren Baqian had a profound smile on his face. Do you really think that anyone can make the Empress fall in love with you? During the Empress's birthday celebration, there were many gigolos, right? There were also many who were well-read, right? Why me? Because I'm coquettish. Of course, if there were people who had ulterior motives, Lin Mengxing would arrange a tragic death for them. Seeing that Ren Baqian wasn't moved at all, Lin Mengxing was more confident in his choice. If such a sentence could make Ren Baqian's expression change, then he would have to doubt whether he had made the right choice. The thoughts of those people are simply the biggest joke in the world. After sitting in that position for too long, I'm full of filth. In fact, I came here for Principal Ren. Ren Baqian's smile froze for a moment. He carefully looked at Lin Mengxing and indeed had the face of a rabbit. He should be dead, right? Ren Baqian thought to himself, it won't be good if word gets out that he is killed on his first day here. Should I arrange a more suitable way for him to die, such as accidentally falling into the blast furnace that is used to make steel? I have been walking around the city for the past few days. The glassware, mirrors, street lamps, soap, newspapers, and cement roads are all from you. Lin Mengxing continued. Ren Baqian felt that he could spare Lin Mengxing's life for now. The various measures in the prisoner camps are also from you. Whether it's a 10-year period or other measures, not only can the captive survive, but they also have hope for the future. They won't become walking corpses that can be abandoned anywhere. They are even living better than many of the civilians in the Yun nation. Principal Ren is benevolent and righteous, which makes me admire him. Not to mention other things, just in the prisoner camps alone, you have saved hundreds of thousands of lives. Also, the various measures taken by Dayo after occupying the Yun nation must have something to do with you. No matter what others say about you, you have used etiquette to influence the barbarians and saved countless people. You must be benevolent, righteous, and wise. Now that the Yun nation has fallen, without you, millions of people would have been plunged into misery and suffering. It is your efforts that have allowed millions of people in the Yun nation to live in peace. At first, I heard about the various measures taken by the prisoner camps from other sources and personally investigated. Only then did I know that Dayo had changed and was no longer the Dayo of the past. Moreover, Dayo's army was difficult to stop, and the defeat of the Yun nation was a foregone conclusion. That was why I dared to speak frankly about the pros and cons and persuade many warlords to surrender. Principal Ren made all kinds of strange things for the benefit of the people and established a newspaper to spread the voice of the people. You have saved countless lives, followed the path of a saint, and reformed the barbarians. Unfortunately, I'm alone. Although I'm not talented, I'm willing to do my part. Renbochin pondered for a long time. Was this kid speaking the truth? Was he about to become a benevolent, righteous, wise, and brave saint? Was he blind? Regardless of whether what he said was true or not, he would keep him around first. At the very least, his ability to brag and flatter wasn't something that ordinary people could compare to. It wouldn't be too late to deal with it if he really found any problems. Renbochin's mouth twitched. All right, I've heard what you said and will take it as the truth. Get ready to take up the job. However, if you want to be a teacher, you have to start by learning how to read. I'm telling the truth, Lin Mengxing immediately replied. He then asked with some doubt, learn how to read. Wait here. I'll find 2 textbooks for you later. Renbochin left Lin Mengxing in the house and came out for some fresh air. It was a little stressful to face him. A ghost-like figure appeared behind Renbochin and said, I almost believed what he said. Who are you looking down on? Renbochin rolled his eyes. The dignified world's most powerful expert can become a ball-kicking maniac. Why can't I care about the world? Hee hee. Li Fu chuckled and disappeared once again. Chapter 831. Take this and learn how to read. Renbochin threw a copy of the 3-character classic to Lin Mengxing. Lin Mengxing flipped through a few pages and finally knew why Renbochin wanted him to learn how to read. There were actually 2 types of words on the book. One was a common language that was used in Great Xia, the Yun nation, and the Qin nation. The other type had never been seen before. These words are. Lin Mengxing was puzzled, but he didn't ask and continued to flip through the book. There were more than 1,000 words in total. Logically speaking, he should be able to finish flipping through them very quickly, but he read very slowly. The more he read, the more puzzled he became. As I thought, Principal Ren is using benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and filial piety to influence the barbarians. This is indeed the way of a sage. After reading some of the content, Lin Mengxing exclaimed in admiration and then asked, however, why can't I find the source of some of the content in this book? Lin Mengxing highly appreciated the contents of the 3-character classic. This book was even more brilliant than Great Xia's primary reading material. The excellent morality, social views, and values were directly revealed in the words. The only thing that he didn't understand was where the allusions came from. Do you think that the world consists of Great Xia, the Yun nation, the Qin nation, and Dayo? It's just a remote place. Renbochin chuckled. Since he had entered the academy, he would definitely see those teaching materials and robots. Since he couldn't hide it anyway, he might as well brag. It wasn't easy to brag at first, but now that he knew that the humans were driven from the other side of the mountains and the sea, he had a plan. On the other side of the mountains and the sea, there was a group of Smurfs. They were lively, smart, mischievous, and sensitive. There was another human nation. They had a civilization different from the 4 nations and a more developed society. Renbochin was from that nation, which explained a lot of things. Anyway, they couldn't verify it, right? When they had the ability to verify it, Renbochin could take them to outer space. Even though the great Empress had explained the origins of the human race to the imperial court, she had ordered them not to divulge it to anyone else. After all, this matter involved too many people, and it wouldn't be beneficial to let more people know. However, this didn't prevent Renbochin from revealing that the 4 countries currently occupied only a corner of this world. Sure enough, as soon as Renbochin said this, Lin Mengxing was immediately dumbfounded with an incredulous look on his face. Principal Ren's meaning. Principal Ren's meaning. Renbochin was a quick-witted person, but he couldn't even speak fluently at this moment. It was evident that Renbochin's words had an impact on his worldview. Previously, everyone thought that they were at the center of the world. And there was only one continent in this world. However, Rinpoche's words shattered her worldview that she had always had. That's what I meant. This was just a corner of the world. Whether it's the Aboriginals, Great Xia, or the Yun Nation, they are all barbarians in my eyes. Rinpoche smiled mysteriously. Are there really other countries in this world? Lin Mengxing looked at the three-character classic in his hand, not knowing whether to believe it or not. He didn't expect to hear such a horrifying thing on his first day at the academy. This made some of the thoughts in his mind turn into a mess. Just like the roads outside, the glass, and the cement roads may seem magical to you, but they're actually very common things. Rinpoche shrugged. Lin Mengxing thought about what Rinpoche said and then looked at the three-character classic and began to believe it. Seeing that it was almost time, Rinpoche dragged the bewildered Lin Mengxing to class. This is Lin Mengxing, who will be an assistant teacher at the academy soon. Rinpoche pointed at Lin Mengxing, who was standing at the door in a daze. Someone from the Jing tribe? Someone was immediately puzzled. Are you stupid? People from the Jing tribe have big heads. Is he from the Yun Nation? I heard that yesterday, Her Majesty offered him an official position and wanted to come to the academy to teach. Is that him? The students immediately started discussing. It's good that you have heard about it. I won't say more. Be more well-behaved in the future. Don't hit or scold the teachers. Don't threaten the teachers. If I find out what you have done, you know the consequences. Rinpoche looked fierce. Just now, he knew that Lin Mengxing was only at the Manwu level, which was considered pretty good in the Yun Nation. At the very least, he could open a martial arts center and accept disciples. As a scholar, this was considered a very high level of strength. Unfortunately, this was Dayo. The peddlers who set up stalls on the street were all at the Manwu level. If they weren't at the Earthwill level, they would be embarrassed to say that they practiced martial arts. The unscrupulous merchants of the Yun Nation had offended Dayo a lot over the years and had just been at war for more than a year. If Rinpoche didn't warn them, he would probably see humiliating the classroom tomorrow. After Rinpoche lectured for the whole morning, Lin Mengxing became even more confused. Before coming here, he was still very confident in his knowledge. Not to mention being a teacher, it wouldn't be a problem for him to take the written exam in Great Xia. In the end, he realized that he didn't understand what Rinpoche was saying at all. He had never heard of square roots, cubic roots, or the law of universal gravitation. In addition, what shocked him even more was that there were puppets that could speak, emit light, and even make pictures appear on the wall. In the past, he felt that the stories of wooden oxen and horses that could move were fantastical enough. After seeing it today, he realized that what he had heard before wasn't true. If that puppet said that it was made by the gods, he would believe it. At this point, he completely trusted Rinpoche's words. He had to believe it. He also sadly realized that he didn't only have to learn words, but also had a lot to learn. Now, he could even call a student to be his teacher, let alone a teacher. Rinpoche didn't care about his thoughts and went back to the office to wait after class. In addition to attending classes and making arrangements for Lin Mengxing, there was another thing he needed to do, which was to receive gifts. Although it wasn't a big deal, he had to give so many people a chance since they were full of enthusiasm and anticipation. At this time, a few people were walking on a street in Beihong district with horrified looks on their faces. There wasn't anything unusual on this street yesterday, but today, there were all kinds of skeletons hanging on the walls on both sides of the street. There were animal heads, human heads, sternum, spine, thigh bones, feet, and so on. There was a dazzling array of skeletons, and every one of them was terrifyingly white. When the wind blew through the gaps of these skeletons, the entire street was filled with the wailing of ghosts and the howling of gods. Even under the bright sunlight, they felt cold all over and were surrounded by gusts of chilly wind. I heard that when a new prisoner enters the prison, they usually have to show their strength first. Is this how they show their strength? What are they doing? We're just here to send a visiting card today. There's no need to put on such a big show, right? I don't think it's appropriate to send a visiting card today. Cough, stick out your chests. We're here to send gifts. No matter how barbaric they are, they won't behead those who send gifts, right? Didn't they just behead one yesterday? Chapter 832. For the next 2 days, many big shots went to court with a bag on their back. It was the stomach of a beast that was about the size of a palm and could fit 2 altos. However, it wouldn't shrink and was made of an extremely elastic material. Renbochin felt that if he used this material to make stockings, it definitely wouldn't tear. The two of them rolled on the bed sheet. Just as they were about to knock on the door and deliver the chicken, they used all their strength. Mother****, I can't tear it apart. The next day, the man went out with a pale face and weak steps. Those who didn't know better would think that he had kidney problems. God knew that he spent the whole night tearing stockings. In the end, he didn't even know why he did it. What girlfriend? What love? None of them were as fun as tearing stockings. Ahem, I digressed. For the next 2 days, many of the big shots went to court with a bag on their back. When they poured out the contents of the bag, they found that it was full of precious jewels. They piled up in the hall, and the hall was shining with golden light. Tu Wan, the Minister of Revenue, was a dignified and enchanting mature woman. She smiled so widely that her 16 teeth were revealed. All of these things went into the national treasury. These things were 70% of the gifts they received, and the remaining 30% was considered as a red packet. Even those from the Yun nation who gave gifts didn't expect these big shots to hand over all of them. Their moral awareness was frighteningly high. In fact, if Renbochin hadn't specifically told the Empress about this matter, and she had opened her mouth to change the nature of accepting bribes into charitable donations to the national treasury, those people wouldn't even have had the chance to give gifts. It wasn't that these people in court had a high moral awareness, but that the Aboriginals simply didn't have the habit of giving gifts. There was only one rule in the minds of the Aboriginals: whoever had the biggest fist was the boss. Moreover, these big shots all had houses and land. Back then, they had robbed the entire Han nation and the Yun nation. Although they weren't filthy rich, their family assets weren't meager. As a result, they didn't have much need for property. More importantly, Dayo was extremely poor and lacking in supplies. They had nowhere to spend their money. From top to bottom, they hadn't experienced the baptism of money at all. Moreover, these people from the Yun nation were like rats. Who could hide the fact that thousands of them were trying to curry favor and give gifts in the city? If he hadn't guessed this beforehand, they wouldn't even have been able to knock on the door. The current situation was a happy one. There was an additional income for the national treasury, and all the big shots took the red packets with a peace of mind. The people of the Yun nation were also relieved. If they couldn't deliver these things, they would probably be worried when they returned. The only one who wasn't in a good mood was Renbochin, the instigator of this incident. Mother****, are those people blind or stupid? He was a grand prince, but the people who came to him to give gifts were just a few cats and kittens. When he asked, he found out that the same person had given him less than a third of what he had given Tongjinye. Renbochin simply didn't expect that when that group of people saw that he wasn't in court that day and that he wasn't an Aboriginal, they would immediately conclude that he wasn't in the center of the court. The Jing tribe is more likable, Renbochin said leisurely. The Jing tribe's troops gave the Empress a big gift, and the various sects also gave Renbochin's gifts. Their combined gifts were much more than those given to the Empress. How considerate! Renbochin's kindness to them wasn't in vain. Lin Mengxing, who was studying the 1,000-character classic and simplified Chinese characters opposite Renbaqian, looked up with doubt in his eyes. He didn't know why Renbaqian suddenly said this. Then, he thought of something and looked pensive. School holidays will start tomorrow for 16 days. You don't have to come to school during this time, Renbaqian said casually and went to the classroom to assign homework to the students. He was going to get married soon, yet he didn't forget about his student studies. Was he touched? Principal, isn't it hurtful to talk about homework on such a joyous day? Du Laolu smiled mischievously as the group of students laughed. Tong Lan sneered. Based on my understanding of Yagüe, things aren't that simple. Renbaqian laughed and said, therefore, in order to celebrate such a joyous day, your homework will be doubled. Also, there will be an extra set of exercises. Are you happy? Is it exciting? Everyone's faces turned ashen as they turned to glare at Du Laolu. Couldn't you accumulate some good karma when you were going to get married soon? After Renbaqian happily assigned homework to the students and left, a scuffle broke out in the classroom. It was a group fight as the other students beat up Du Laolu. If he wanted to fight all the other students, it would be fine. When Renbaqian was about to leave the school, Li Fu appeared like a ghost and shouted, Kid! Uncle Li! Has anyone ever told you that you are quite scary? Renbaqian turned his head and saw an old face full of wrinkles. It was all thanks to Renbaqian that he didn't know when he would suddenly appear and shout in someone's ear. If it were someone else, they would have been scared to death. Ahem, you talk too much. Li Fu's expression was a little strange. He seemed to be a little regretful and nostalgic. Just think about his past and you would understand. If it weren't for that unknown deity who made him a cuckold, he wouldn't have ended up in this state and would have had a wife and children. He probably wouldn't have been the world's #1 expert. This is for you. Li Fu threw a book at him. Bedroom technique. Renbaqian took it and asked subconsciously. He couldn't possibly be giving him the finger of God at this time, right? Pfft. Li Fu spat like a nail and almost hit Renbaqian's toes. I have gained some insights over the years, and I can't pass it on to anyone. I'm giving it to you. Li Fu said rather casually. If it were someone else, they would treat this as a treasure or simply bury it somewhere and shout, do you want power? My martial arts, my everything, are buried there. One piece. Although Li Fu was the world's #1 expert, he had never taken his martial arts seriously. He finally saw some hope in Renbaqian. Now that it was Renbaqian's wedding, he didn't have anything good to give him. As such, he might as well give this book that might be buried with him as a gift. Renbaqian quickly put the book in his pocket after hearing this. Although Li Fu wasn't the world's #1 expert, his martial arts were solid. Renbaqian had always suspected that even if he hadn't reached the level of the spirit will level, he was close to it. This book of insights could be used as a family heirloom. After receiving Li Fu's generous gift, Renbaqian was in a good mood. He smiled at Li Fu and said, thank you very much. I heard that you partnered with someone to sell iron crotches. How's business now? Cough, it wasn't a big deal to travel everywhere in the past. Now that there are no wild goats or cows around, I have to spend money to eat and make a living. People here really don't know how to respect their seniors. In the past, wherever I went, people would send me good food, drinks, and travel expenses. But here, people challenge me every day, and I don't even get paid for my hard work. Li Fu's face turned red as he complained. Renbaqian felt that the world's #1 expert was doing badly in Lan City. However, who came up with these iron crotches? Presumably, it wasn't Li Fu. Well, these iron crotches were sold at Ning Caichen's tavern in front of Jing Street. That guy probably came up with this idea after seeing people coming to his door every day to get kicked. Then, the two of them colluded, and these iron crotches were quite popular. Although they were called iron crotches, they were actually iron sheets wrapped around ironwood. In fact, it didn't matter if these things were under Li Fu's feet because they would break with one kick. However, Li Fu was also very precise with his kicks. Every time he kicked, the other party's injury would be reduced by half. As a result, these iron crotches were naturally popular. It's good to have a wedding night, but don't indulge in women every day. Li Fu said casually. I'm leaving. He immediately disappeared, and Renbochin couldn't even catch him with his eyes. Uncle Li, the doorman, came like a ghost and left without a trace. Chapter 833. Your Majesty, this is the route to the wedding. There are people intercepting you at these 3 locations, and you have to defeat them. Of course, this is just for show. Shi Qing showed the Empress a piece of paper with both hands. There was a big house drawn on it, followed by all kinds of crooked lines and unknown squares. Renbochin looked at it for a long time and asked, what exactly is this drawing? Those who don't know might think it's a talisman. Where is the final destination? This is the palace, this is my residence, this is Jingyang Street, this is Minister Tu's residence, this is Minister Qin's. This is Minister Tong's. That's the destination. Renbochin grinned. He didn't know who drew such a good drawing. It would be a miracle if they could understand it. Sir Tong's residence is the final destination? Renbochin raised his voice slightly. The wedding arrangements were arranged by the various ministers. Now that it was the final stage, Renbochin came to see how the arrangements were made so that he could have a clear idea. After all, it was a big wedding, and he had to put in some effort. However, couldn't they just say that it was the Tong residence instead of such a drawing? If one didn't look at the drawing, it would be quite formal. One look at the drawing and it would be over. This was abstraction. Of course, we can't just let Her Majesty pick you up from Pingle Park and call it a day. Shi Qing stroked his beard and smiled at Renbochin. After that, Shi Qing explained to the Empress what to do on that day. At the end, Renbochin pondered and asked, what should I do? Shi Qing sized Renbochin up and said, just wait there for Her Majesty to pick you up. Renbochin snorted. This wedding had nothing to do with him. If Sir Ren wants, you can make yourself prettier. Usually, Aboriginal women look like this on their wedding day. Shi Qing smiled like a chrysanthemum. After Renbochin stared at him for a long time, the Empress suddenly burst out laughing. Her smile was really like a flower, completely different from Shi Qing's. The Empress rested her chin on her hand and looked at Renbochin, who was glaring at her. Renbochin suddenly thought of something. With an embarrassed look on his face, he asked, I will be wearing men's clothes, right? Don't let me wear a bride's clothes. I still have some face. Of course, if there is a need, I don't have to. Shi Qing looked at him with a strange expression for a long time. He wondered how this guy could think of such a thing. With your figure and appearance, would you still look good in women's clothing? Of course it's men's clothes. Phew. Renbochin heaved a sigh of relief. As long as she was dressed as a man, nothing else mattered. Shi Qing continued to report to the Empress, including how to set up the stage before setting off, and how to return home. After all, it was the Empress's wedding, and it couldn't be done carelessly. The Aboriginal wedding was originally a very simple procedure. They would just fight their way to the door, snatch the bride, and then leave. Now, they had created a lot of trouble. When talking about the interceptors that day, Renbochin heard the name Hongwu. With Hongwu's status, he should be considered one of the Empress's people. Now, he had become a bridegroom. Initially, Renbochin thought that it would be someone like Tong Jinye who appeared in 2 shots. First, he acted like an expert and blocked the way. Then, he was kicked into the wall by the Empress. He did not expect it to be Hong Wu. Of course, Sir Hong is just putting on an act. Shi Qing continued to blush like a chrysanthemum. After explaining everything to Rinpoche for an hour, Shi Qing finally said, "Also, Sir Ren's title of nobility has to be decided. It has to be announced the day after tomorrow." The Empress thought about it for a long time and asked with a puzzled expression, "Why don't I have one? Your Majesty is the Empress of Dayo. Why is there a need for a title?" According to the old traditions of Great Xia and the Hao nation, a posthumous title is only given after death. However, the two previous emperors are nowhere to be found, and we don't even know if they are dead or alive, especially the first emperor. With his strength, he might still be somewhere, so the previous emperor didn't have a posthumous title. Shi Qing explained to the Empress. "Oh." The Empress nodded and pondered for a long time. Her gaze drifted to Rinpoche's face, the roof of the palace, and back to his face again. She racked her brains to think of a title for him. Earth Prince, or Ball Queen for short. Prince from another world, or World King for short. This didn't seem right. Given Sir Ren's status, it would be best to have one title. In other words, add one word before the title. Here is a list of titles prepared by the officials. Your Majesty can choose one of them. Shi Qing took out a piece of paper from his pocket. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" The Empress said unhappily. She had killed a lot of brain cells just now but didn't gain anything in the end. "Yi King." The Empress read the first word on the paper. Yi means radiance and brilliance. Principal Ren brought street lamps to expel the darkness, so the word Yi is suitable, Shi Qing explained to the Empress. Lian King. Jing King. Peng King. Shi Qing explained as the Empress ticked off the names with her fingers. There wasn't much to say about Lian King. Jing King and Peng King were both named after their territories. For example, Jing was Tianjing Basin, and Peng was a part of the Yun nation that used to be called Peng Prefecture. The Empress shook her head slightly. These kinds of titles usually referred to the area as the king's territory. The Empress didn't care about these territories, but she didn't like these titles. Rinpoche felt tired for the two of them as he listened. Given the level of education of these big shots in the imperial court, it was really difficult for them to come up with such a list of titles. It was roughly equivalent to asking a bad student to write an 800-word essay on the topic of era. Zhao King, the title is derived from the sun, from the call, and the call is also the sound. Sun refers to sunlight. Zhao means guide or call. It can also mean lead the light or call for the light. This title is also very suitable for Sir Ren. This is all right. The Empress pondered for a long time and felt that this was quite to her liking. She wasn't sure about other people. As for herself, Rinpoche dragged her out of the cold palace after he arrived. "Let's do this." The Empress immediately decided. "In that case, I'll go and make the arrangements." Shi Qing put away the paper and took his leave. Rinpoche's expression changed from cheerful at the beginning to grave, and then to black. Did Shi Qing really explain the words, Zhao King, like this? Why did he feel that it was weird? Ri. Xiao. Ri. Xiao. It seems like it can also be explained as when to summon. Damn, I knew that anything with the word Ri in it can't be looked at directly. Your Majesty, I think it's good to change to another title. Rinpoche looked up with an embarrassed look on his face. I think it's not bad. This title is very suitable for you. Do you still think it's inappropriate? The Empress was rather happy. Rinpoche's face was full of vigor. In the end, he didn't tell the Empress about his intention to expose himself. The Aboriginals were a very simple race. At least, the word re represented the sun. At least, those words and phrases didn't have any additional meaning in the eyes of the Aboriginals. Chapter 834. The first day of the new year was also the day before the wedding of Rinpoche and the Empress. Today, the walls of the palace were decorated with Aboriginal-style ornaments, just like the outer walls of the official residences. Tingyu's head had been hanging on the palace wall for more than a year. His head had been buried under the palace for so long, but it hadn't been eaten by insects or rats. It hadn't become a skeleton either, but most of the water had been removed, and his face could still be vaguely seen. This gave Rinpoche a clearer understanding of the body of a spirit wool expert. Of course, Tingyu was once the fourth most powerful expert in the world and was proficient in spear techniques. His body was far stronger than an ordinary spirit wool expert's. Next to Tingyu was a row of skeletons. They were the spirit wool experts of Tianjing Basin, the two spirit wool experts who had tried to assassinate Rinpoche, and some other experts who had been killed by the Empress. However, there was something different in the middle that immediately changed the style of the painting. An arrow that had been bitten by insects and rats. The bow was blown by the wind and knocked against the body of the instrument, making a sound like a wooden fish being struck. It was completely different from the surrounding objects that gave off a chilly breeze when the wind blew. It felt much warmer. Rinpoche didn't know who was so stupid as to dig up this thing and hang it on the palace wall. However, Rinpoche felt that this Aboriginal style that was full of horror was even more thoughtless. What Chinese style, French style, British style, Mediterranean style? I only admire the Aboriginal style. Your Majesty's wedding is tomorrow. What's the point of hanging a row of skeletons on the palace wall? Ha! Rinpoche turned his head to look at those hanging on the wall and felt helpless. He and the Empress each put on a Calabash Brothers mask and slipped out of the palace. On the first day of the new year, there should have been fewer people in Lawn City. However, because the Empress's wedding was tomorrow, the number of people in the city increased. In addition, after the Yun nation was defeated, the goods in Lawn City were much richer. At this time, the streets were full of burly men and enchanting women. Among them, the most eye-catching were the two Calabash Brothers masks that Rinpoche and the Empress wore. These masks were even more eye-catching than their actual faces. Most of the shops on both sides of Jingyang Street were now open. Two of the Yun nation's families gave the Empress gifts and took back their original shops. The next day, they were arrested, and a large sum of money was spent to get them out. Now, they were finally well-behaved. Speaking of which, the people of the Yun nation might not know which was more important, their heads or their money. The Yun nation was already gone, yet they still dared to sell it at 10 times the previous price. Rinpoche was willing to bet that these two families wouldn't survive for more than half a year. There were only a few shops that had been taken back. Other than that, there were still many shops that were closed. The entrance became a good place for the mountain people to set up their stalls. 7-leaf grass, a 10-year-old 7-leaf grass. It has an excellent effect on muscle growth and hemostasis. It's a must-have medicine for hunting in the mountains and fighting on the streets. This advertisement was filled with the valiant aura of the Aboriginals. Black Mountain Red Flower. Since the opponent is using 7-leaf grass, you should use red flower. I guarantee that you will recover faster than him. Well, in less than a minute, the two shops started fighting. While fighting, they took medicine to replenish their health. After fighting for a full 5 minutes, no one was injured, but the two shops had sold more than half of their medicinal herbs. Scorpion tubes, 30 copper coins for one. High-quality poisonous scorpions. Once stung, you will lie down for 7 days. Inhaling a mouthful of it will make you faint for half a day. Yes, this was selling drugs on the streets. Speaking of which, this advertising slogan was really creative. However, there were quite a number of people around the stall. Clear Spring Mountain's red scorpion leg is even sharper than iron. The price of 7 of them is equivalent to an iron knife of the same size. Renbochin glanced at the stall and saw that it was selling scorpion claws. The big ones were the size of a short knife while the small ones were the size of a dagger. If they were really similar to iron, they would be good items for the commoners. The city is much livelier than usual today, the Empress said excitedly as she looked at the bustling scene of people coming and going on both sides. It will be this lively every day in the future. Your Majesty, please don't find it annoying. Renbochin laughed. Now that they had the supplies from the Yun nation, Lan City was the first to prosper. As a capital, the population of less than 100,000, including the farms outside the city, was really too small. Why would I find it annoying? It would be great if that's the case, the Empress said. Although she was wearing a mask, Renbochin could guess that she must be smiling under it at the moment. The two of them walked to the shops of the royal family and saw that there were many attendants of the Yun nation standing outside. The shops were filled to the brim. Whether it was glass products, mirrors, or spices, they were all very attractive to the rich and overbearing local tycoons of the Yun nation. Of course, the price was 10 times that of the aboriginals. The two of them stood outside and looked for a while before walking directly to the other districts. Renbochin sighed as he walked and said, "These people from the Yun nation are really rich. After giving so many gifts, they actually still have money to buy things." The first thought that came to the Empress's mind was to rob them again. Then, she realized that the Yun nation was already her territory. This made her feel a little regretful. In the future, the money to build a new city will depend on them. Renbochin laughed. There were many local tycoons in Great Xia, but Great Xia was in flames now. They would wait for them to settle down before robbing them. Of course, they would use all kinds of unique products. Robbing with these things wasn't much slower than robbing with a knife. The two of them walked around the city for a long time and somehow found themselves on a very familiar street. Compared to other places in the city, this small building was much more exquisite. There weren't all kinds of fruit trees in the courtyard, but waterside pavilions. Although it was afternoon, a group of good-looking girls were leaning against the window and laughing. Then, they heard Tong Jingye's loud laughter and said, "Come, let me feel whether this body is plump or not, this old man." Renbochin cursed in his heart. He turned to the Empress and whispered in her ear, "Your Majesty, it's Sir Tong." "Yes. I'm not deaf," the Empress responded faintly. Seeing that the Empress didn't react at all, Renbochin picked up a stone and threw it at the window from which the laughter came. Then, a woman screamed. Which B** starred through the stone. "Do you want to die?" Tong Jingye's furious voice came from the window, and a figure jumped out. Other than that old thing, Qin Chuan, there was no one else who dared to throw a stone into his room. Old B** starred, "Today, I'm going to." Before Tong Jingye could land and finish cursing, he suddenly found a figure in front of him. A familiar red dress. A familiar movement. It was still the same familiar formula and the same familiar smell, "Your Majesty." Tong Jingye was stunned and blurted out. Bang! The speed at which Tong Jingye flew back was faster than the speed at which he came. A few screams were heard in the small building. The Empress floated back to Renbochin's side and turned to look at him. "Ahem, I was just greeting Sir Tong. I didn't expect him to be so agitated." Renbochin coughed and sounded surprised. The Empress stared at him, didn't guess what he was thinking, and continued to walk back. Finally, the two of them turned to the bottom of the clock tower. This place was now a small square with many stone chairs around it. Unfortunately, they were all occupied, which made them feel a little regretful. They originally wanted to sit here for a while. Seeing that the street lights were starting to light up, the two of them walked back to the palace. "Hey, Your Majesty, the wedding is tomorrow," Ren Baqin suddenly said. Even though the wedding was tomorrow, he didn't feel very excited while strolling around the city with the Empress. Instead, he felt a little calm. It was as if he had everything in the world as long as this person was by his side. All other feelings were gone. "Yeah," the Empress responded softly. "Are you nervous?" Ren Baqin smiled and bumped his shoulder against hers. "Yeah." The Empress's voice was very soft. "This isn't like you, Your Majesty." Ren Baqin chuckled. "Why aren't you calling me by my name? It seems to have been a long time." The Empress asked another question. This question had been on her mind for a long time, but she had never mentioned it. Ren Baqin thought for a while and calmly said, "This has always made me remember that I have Your Majesty, the only woman in this world. No one can replace her and compare to her." "Is that so?" the Empress asked softly. This answer was somewhat unexpected. In fact, she quite liked it when Ren Baqin called her by her name because he was the only one who would do that. However, this answer wasn't annoying. On the contrary, she was a little happy. Ren Baqin pulled the Empress's shoulder and stretched his face forward, then. Chapter 835. Ren Baqin left the palace before midnight. After all, he couldn't stay in the palace the day before the wedding. His clothes were sent to the Tong residence in advance. Although it was late at night, there weren't many dark spots in Lan City due to the street lights. At this time, all the mansions on Jingyang Street were brightly lit, and servants were busy decorating the walls. There were all kinds of flowers. No one knew when they had brought them into the city. At this moment, all of them were hanging on the wall, turning Beihong district into a sea of flowers. There were 2 sunflowers in the eyes of the skulls. They were probably too cute in the eyes of the aboriginals. There were garlands on the thighs. The spines of ferocious beasts that were a few meters long were wrapped in flowers. There were hand bones stuck on the top of the wall, each holding a red flower in its palm. The white bones danced with the flowers, and the fragrance assailed his nostrils. Ren Baqin felt even colder. Great Elder Shi Qin got someone to move a rocking chair and table in front of the door. He and Junior Elder Ko Zhihai each held a circular fan and watched the busy people around them. Seeing Ren Baqin come over, they smiled and nodded. Ever since the Empress returned from the 60,000 mountains and told them about Qi's sitting situation, Ko Zhihai had become more well-behaved. Ren Baqin cupped his hands at them and continued forward. There wasn't much difference between the front and the back as people were busy everywhere. Tu Wan, the Minister of Revenue, Xian Hua, the Minister of Rights, Shui Yan, the Minister of Justice, Xiong Yaohe, the great general who supports the nation, and the residences of the 5 protectorates in Lan City were all in Beihong district next to Jingyang Street. This was the core area of Lan City, and almost all of them were busy at this time. Further away, in a more remote area, were the mansions of the various ministers. At this moment, they were also brightly lit. When he arrived at the front of the Tong residence, they were naturally making preparations. The courtyard was cleaned, watered, and sprinkled with flower petals. A fierce-looking middle-aged man stood outside the door and laughed when he saw Ren Baqin. "Greetings, Zhao Prince Consort." Yesterday, Ren Baqin's title as a prince consort had been registered and officially posted on the bulletin boards of all the streets. In other words, even though there was still half a day before the wedding, Ren Baqin was now a prince consort. Ren Baqin inexplicably recalled that the person who named him when he was young said that he could live to be 8,000 years old. He always felt that it was F*King nonsense, but he didn't expect it to actually come true. As for her younger brother, Ren Wanyan. Oh, that was a random name that her father had given him to match her. Ren Wanyan had always resented this. 1,000-year tortoise and 10,000-year turtle. Thank you for your trouble. Renbochin jumped down and cupped his hands. The man in front of her was Tong Jinye's son, Tong Shan, and Tong Lan's father. He was a typical henpecked husband, mainly because he couldn't beat his wife. Tong Lan's mother was called Tai Kuang, a name that didn't sound like a woman's at all. Her father, Tai Feng, nicknamed Madman Tai, was the commandant of the Protectorate of the Northeast. Madman Tai had been called Madman Tai for half of his life. Later, when he had a daughter, he decided to take the name Tai Kuang. Zhao Prince Consort, you are too polite. This is the honor of the Tong family. Tong Shan laughed. Please come in and talk. My father is already waiting. Not long after he entered the door, he heard a crisp greeting, Yague. Tong Lan was still dressed in white, but she had a red belt tied around her waist and a red headband tied around her head. Tong Lan had grown a lot taller and was almost 1.4 meters tall. Here, this is for you. Tong Lan jumped to Renbochin's side in a flash and handed him a box. Renbochin took it with a smile and said, "Thank you." This little Lolita was quite cute at times. He looked down and saw 3 words on the box, bone healing ointment. Renbochin looked up with a fake smile and asked, "Have you done your homework? Come on, let's hurt each other." Tong Lan's face immediately collapsed, and she whimpered, "I spent half a month's allowance to buy it." She rolled her eyes at Renbochin until her pupils couldn't be seen. Then, she jumped over the wall and disappeared. After entering the main hall, he saw a few tall and burly men hanging red cloths. Tong Jinye was sitting there and drinking wine. "Zhao Prince Consort is here." Tong Jinye looked up and saw Renbochin with a fake smile. "Sir Tong, do you have a toothache?" Renbochin's smile was almost identical to Tong Jinye's. Was that stone thrown by Zhao Prince Consort? What stone? Renbochin didn't understand. The 2 bald men looked at each other and burst out laughing. "It seems like I made a mistake." Tong Jinye slapped Renbochin's shoulder, which sounded like a wooden stake being hit. "I don't know what Sir Tong is talking about, but I think you must have made a mistake." "Father, I'll go out and get busy," Tong Shan said. Tong Jinye waved his hand and chased Tong Shan out. "Change your clothes first." Tong Jinye led Renbochin to a room at the back and said, "Everything is inside. Do you need help?" Renbochin looked at the 2 fierce bald men behind Tong Jinye who were trying to put on a gentle expression. He felt a chill run down his spine and said, "No need, I can do it myself." After entering, he found that there were 2 young women in green who didn't look like aboriginals. Most importantly, their eyes were watery, and their cheeks were flushed. They looked shy and timid. What the hell were they doing? "I've already made arrangements. Help Zhao Prince Consort put on his new clothes." Tong Jinye laughed at the door. Renbochin shivered. Tong Jinye found 2 young women from a brothel to help him change his clothes. What were they trying to do? Wasn't it just throwing a stone? Was there a need to be so ruthless? Believe it or not, Her Majesty would beat the sh*t out of you. Hey, what are you 2 doing? Don't touch. What are you touching? Renbochin was nervous. These 2 girls were quite strong and were actually at the earth will level. He was stripped naked by the 2 of them without much resistance. The 2 women immediately cried out in alarm, and their faces were dyed with a touch of red. This was the first time they saw something that was glowing. Based on their actions, expressions, voices, and hands, it was no wonder that old fool Tong Jinye enjoyed it every day. Fortunately, that old fool didn't dare to go overboard. The 2 of them didn't want to be imprisoned under the palace by the Empress tomorrow. They carefully helped Rinpoche change into a set of bright red clothes and cautiously retreated to the side. This set of clothes was a bit similar to the court's formal attire, but it was more complicated. If it weren't for these two, it wouldn't be easy for Rinpoche to wear it. Rinpoche stood in front of the mirror and expressed his satisfaction. The main thing was that he was handsome and looked good in everything he wore. Furthermore, he was in high spirits during happy events. Even his forehead was glowing red when he wore this set of clothes. After changing into a new set of clothes and tying a big red flower in front of his chest, Rinpoche felt that this set of clothes was a hindrance when he walked. As soon as he stepped out of the door, Tongzhinya grabbed him by the arm and led him to the side hall. It's still a long time before daybreak. Why don't we drink some wine? Rinpoche was shocked. F***ck, this is my wedding. You want me to drink? Drinking is a hindrance. Let's talk about it another day. Rinpoche wanted to slip away, but Tongzhinya's arm was like an iron clamp. Just 1 or 2 cups will do. What's there to be afraid of, Sir Ren? Tongzhinya laughed heartily. Besides, there's still green vine soup. I've already prepared it. Someone threw a stone at me yesterday, and Zhao Prince Consort happened to be nearby. I wonder if he saw it. Rinpoche's mind was filled with 3 words, what a sin. Let me tell you, old man, I won't drink today even if you beat me to death. After entering the room, 3 jars of wine were carried up. Tongzhinya carried a jar in one hand and a funnel in the other. Sir Ren, do you want to do it yourself, or do you need my help? 1 hour later, Sir Ren, if this new set of clothes is stained with wine, Her Majesty will inevitably be angry. Why don't you take it off first? Tongzhinya's voice was loud enough to lift the roof. 1 hour later. Rinpoche, who was wearing only underwear, was dumbfounded. In front of him was Tongzhinya, who was also wearing underwear, revealing his muscles, and dancing on the table. Where's the green vine? Soup. Coming, right away, ha 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 ha. 1 hour later, whoosh, whoosh. Chapter 836. 1 comb to the end, 2 comb to the eyebrows. The Empress's thoughts drifted as she listened to the voices. She lowered her eyelids and seemed to be resting. At this time, several female officials were circling around the Empress. Even Qing Yuan and Hong Luan were pushed to the side. Some of them were preparing the bedding in the palace. The bedding on the couch had been changed to red, and the couch was surrounded by a circle of red muslin. In addition, a 100-child tent was hung outside the red muslin, and a 100-child quilt was placed on the couch. Although the fertility rate of the Aboriginals wasn't high, people always had to have some ideals. On the table next to the bed were large red candles with the golden word, happiness. The sky had just brightened, but the palace had been preparing since last night. The entire palace was decorated with lanterns and streamers. After a while, the Empress's fine black hair was braided into countless small braids. At the end of each braid was a small golden bell that made a crisp ringing sound as her hair swayed. Originally, the Empress was going to comb a phoenix coronet, a hairstyle that was decorated with golden phoenixes and jade. However, the Empress chose a hairstyle that was commonly used by Aboriginal girls and decorated with golden bells. This was because the phoenix coronet was often used by Great Xiao's noblewomen on formal occasions. As the Empress of the Aboriginals, she naturally wouldn't choose this kind of hair ornament at this time. As for the hair ornament that an empress should wear on her wedding day, no one had designed it yet. There were at least 100 braids, and they were tied together with a headband inlaid with red gems to form a high ponytail. Your Majesty, it's done. The Empress opened her eyes and saw the heroic and beautiful lady in the mirror when she heard these words. Your Majesty, no matter what hairstyle you have, you are still so beautiful. A female official pursed her lips and smiled. This was a heartfelt praise. Even women would fall for the Empress. Even I don't want to blink when I see you. I really want to see Zhao Prince Consort's expression when he sees you later. Qing Yuan laughed happily. The Empress listened to the praises of others and wanted to know what kind of expression he would have when he saw her. She stood up from her chair and gathered a group of people to help her change her clothes. The main color was red, and the robe had large sleeves. There was a golden phoenix and flower embroidered with golden thread, and it looked exceptionally gorgeous. If Renbaqian saw this dress, he would definitely find it very familiar. It was very similar to the clothes that he had given to the Empress. After everything was prepared, there was another round of praises. The Empress walked out of her bedroom with everyone following behind her. A table had already been prepared in front of the main hall with an imperial edict on it. Shi Qing, Ko Zhihai, and the rest stood at the side with a red cloth tied around their bodies. The Empress walked to the front of the table and looked at Shi Qing with a probing gaze. The other party had clearly told him about the process, but he suddenly couldn't remember. Your Majesty, please wait for a while. Shi Qing smiled at the Empress. The Empress raised her head and looked in the direction of the clock tower. It was 6:15. That's right, there were 12 hours in a day on the clock tower. 1 hour was equivalent to 2 hours. After a quarter of an hour, the Minister of Rites, Xianhua, walked to the front of the crowd and said, "The time has come, Your Majesty, please worship the spirits of the ancestors." The Empress first lit a stick of incense before picking up the imperial edict and reading it. This was to announce the marriage between the Empress and Renbaqian, as well as the title of prince conferring on Renbaqian to the ancestors. Xianhua stroked his beard at the side. This set of seemingly ordinary etiquette actually took a lot of effort to develop, especially in the Ministry of Rites. Other than the Honglu Bureau, which was used to receive envoys from other countries, the Taichung Bureau was like a big cat with 2 or 3 strands of hair and had never played any role. This time, they were finally able to do something for the Empress's wedding. In particular, the Empress was a woman, which was unprecedented even in Great Xia. Naturally, there wasn't much for them to learn from. The time has come, Your Majesty, please set off. Upon hearing this, the Empress heaved a sigh of relief. Ever since she was born, she had never been so well behaved. Following which, she became worried because there seemed to be a lot of things to do today. Especially now, they were about to set off for the Tong residence to escort the bride. When they arrived at the palace, there were already 100 imperial guards standing in front of them. There was also Qi Shui with a red cloth wrapped around its neck. It was lying on the ground, bored to death. Upon seeing the Empress, it immediately perked up and shook its head. In the distance, there were many onlookers. Many Aborigines had been waiting in Lon City for a few days just for this day. There were also commoners in Lon City. In the distance, there was already a sea of people. When the Empress saw such a big scene, she immediately felt a little flustered. In the past, no matter what happened or how many people were in front of her, the Empress never cared. However, today was different. Other people's weddings were filled with joy, but the Empress was panicking to death. In a flash, she landed on Qi Shui's back, took a deep breath, calmed herself down, and said, "Set off." 100 imperial guards opened the way in front, followed by the Empress and the people from the Ministry of Rites. "Your Majesty! Her Majesty is here." As the procession moved forward, the voices of the onlookers came one after another. "I wish Your Majesty many children, 100 children and 1,000 grandchildren." It was unknown who shouted this, but immediately, there was a chorus of responses. Logically speaking, there wasn't anything wrong with this, but the problem was that their Empress was a woman, 100 children and 1,000 grandchildren. 1 child a year, for 100 years. The imperial guards who opened the way in front had a twisted expression on their faces. The Empress was on the verge of turning from sunny to cloudy. The procession slowly walked more than 100 meters past the crowd. On both sides, a large number of fresh flowers floated down from the hands of the people standing on the courtyard wall. Suddenly, there was a loud shout in front of them, "Hey! This road is opened by me, and this tree is planted by me. If you want to marry a prince, you have to defeat me first." Immediately, there was a burst of laughter. It was unknown whether they were laughing at the first half of the sentence or the one about marrying a prince. Many people then reacted. It was actually a woman marrying a man. All of them had a strange look on their faces. Immediately, the Empress's face turned black. "Qin Chuan, you are simply asking for a beating." Without saying anything, the Empress soared into the sky like a red cloud and covered the complacent Qin Chuan. Bang! With a palm strike, Qin Chuan was nailed to the ground, leaving only his head outside. Set off. After walking another 100 meters, there was another person blocking the way. "Your Majesty, if you want to marry a prince, you have to get past me first." Zhuo Yan, the Minister of Justice, crossed his arms, raised his neck, and wore a pair of sunglasses. This time, the Empress went easy on Zhuo Yan and used 3 moves to defeat him before the procession moved forward again. Not far from the entrance of the Tong residence, there was another person blocking the way. "Your Majesty, you shouldn't have come." Hong Wu stood there shaking his head. Not only was he there, but he was also holding a long iron rod in his hand. He had even prepared a weapon. This made many people feel strange. During the wedding, they only exchanged blows casually. Why would they use weapons? Was he really going to stop the Empress? The Empress's face turned even darker. "Do I have to retreat?" "It would be best if that's the case." Hong Wu agreed. The Empress's face turned red. This time, she was angry. "In the past, you told me every day to choose a husband and have children. Now, you are here to create trouble for me." "I haven't sparred with the great general for a long time," the Empress said faintly. Hong Wu twirled the rod in his hand and said, "As long as you defeat me, Zhao Prince Consort will be yours." Chapter 837. In the backyard of the Tong residence, a lady hurried into a side courtyard. She looked to be in her 30s, and her hair was casually tied behind her head. Tong Lan could be vaguely seen between her eyebrows, but her face was extremely cold. She was Tong Lan's mother, Tai Kuang, and basically handled all the affairs of the Tong residence. She didn't feel anything wrong when Tong Xingye dragged him out for a drink last night. However, the Empress was almost at the door now, and the two of them hadn't come out yet. She knew that something was wrong. "Young madam." 2 burly men were sitting in the courtyard in a daze and quickly got up when they saw her. Not only did this young madam handle the affairs of the residence in an orderly manner, but she was also quite strong. In another 10 or 20 years, she might even break through to the cardinal heaven level and be respected in the residence. "Are father and Zhao Prince Consort inside?" Tai Kuang asked coldly. "Yes," the two of them replied honestly. Tai Kuang walked in with a cold expression. They quickly stopped her and said, "Young madam, the minister said that no one is allowed in before Her Majesty arrives." "Is that what father said?" Tai Kuang raised his head and looked straight into their eyes. "Yes. All the more reason for me to go in. Father is acting willfully, and you two don't know what's good for you." Tai Kuang's face was cold as she walked past them. They wanted to stop her again, but a pair of white jade-like palms pressed against their chests and sent them flying into the wall. "Humph." Tai Kuang snorted and pushed open the door to see the mess in the room. The two of them were only wearing underpants, and the smell of alcohol filled the room. Zhao Prince Consort was lying on the ground while Tong Xingye was lying sideways on the table. Both of them were snoring loudly. Tai Kuang gritted his teeth. Needless to say, Her Majesty would be furious if she saw this scene. Zhao Prince Consort would definitely be punished, and Tong Xingye wouldn't be able to escape either. Tai Kuang couldn't understand what Tong Xingye was trying to do. Just to drag Zhao Prince Consort into punishment? Even at the cost of his own life. This was simply a mutual destruction. Someone. Tai Kuang turned around and ordered, "Get someone to prepare some green vine soup." Immediately, 2 more people will help Zhao Prince Consort wipe his body and put on new clothes. He listened carefully to the sounds of battle in the distance and thought to himself, "Great General, you must delay His Majesty for a while longer." A few minutes later, Renbochin woke up with a splitting headache and a tumultuous stomach. He cursed, "Tong Xingye, you old bastard, you tricked me." However, even though he was cursing, his voice wasn't very loud. He didn't even have the strength to shout now. He felt like he would vomit if he moved. Even though he had attained the earth will level and his physical fitness was incomparable to that of an ordinary person, he would still have a headache after a hangover. He would also vomit if he drank too much. Last night, there were 3 vats of wine, and each vat contained at least a few dozen kilograms. Even if the degree was not high, it was enough to kill him. Tong Xingye lay on the ground and laughed. He looked rather happy. Friends across generations should share joys and sorrows. This old man will also suffer misfortune with you. What else did Zhao Prince Consort have to say? Why isn't His Majesty here yet? Renbochin immediately gritted his teeth. Your death will be worse than mine. Tong Xingye said unhurriedly, if it were in the past, it would be hard to say. But today, take a guess. Ah. Renbochin was so angry that he wanted to jump up and hammer him. Why exactly? Renbochin gritted his teeth. It couldn't be because of that stone, right? Tong Xingye, this old bastard, had been sent flying by the Empress's kick many times. Tong Xingye turned his head to look at both sides and said, "All of you, back off." Then, he grunted and said, "Yesterday, I was shocked by Her Majesty when I jumped out for that stone and got kicked. I can't stand up after I go back. Who do you think I should look for to settle this score?" Renbochin's face turned green and white. "You have 1 foot in the coffin, you old bastard. I'm still young. According to the lifespan of a Cardinal Heaven expert, I can live for at least another 100 years. Renbochin was speechless. According to his lifespan, this seemed to be the case. Tong Xingye was only over 60 years old. According to his lifespan, he could still live for another 120 years, which was indeed considered young. He turned his head and scolded, "You are on the verge of death, and you still want to live for another 120 years. Bah! Tomorrow, I will reserve a piece of land for you under the square in front of the palace." Renbochin's phlegm brushed past Tong Xingye's head and flew out. Bah! Tong Xingye spat back. Bah! Renbochin hit him 3 times in a row. "Is the green vine soup ready?" Tai Kuang was speechless as she watched the 2 of them spit at each other. If it weren't for their status, she would have gagged them. "It's coming. It's coming." After gulping down a bowl of green vine soup, Renbochin immediately felt his stomach warm up. It was as if a stabilizing needle had been set up in his stomach, and it slowly began to calm down. Sir Hong has been defeated. Her Majesty will be here soon. Someone rushed in to report. At this moment, not far from the Tong residence, Hong Wu's long rod had already flown to the side. The iron rod, which was as thick as a forearm, had already formed an S shape. The surrounding courtyard walls had collapsed, and the bricks on the ground were shattered. If the 2 of them hadn't fought in this small area, the entire street would have been destroyed. Those who knew that this was a wedding, but those who didn't would have thought that it was a demolition. There were bruises on Hongwu's face, and he looked a little lonely. Your Majesty has grown up, and I'm old. Even though the Empress was stronger than him a few years ago, Hongwu didn't use his blood essence and didn't bring his best bow. He had used all his other means, but he still couldn't do anything to the Empress. He could feel the gap between their strength increasing. The Empress's face darkened. Great General, are you serious? Hongwu shook his head. I just want to test out your Majesty's means. Then, he revealed a gratified smile and said, Your Majesty's talent is unmatched even by the previous two emperors. I believe your Majesty will reach a level that no one has ever reached before. This is the prosperity of the Aboriginals. The prosperity of Deo. Woo! The prosperity of the Aboriginals. Your Majesty. Your Majesty. Your Majesty. The commoners in the distance heard Hongwu's words and immediately became excited. The entire street was filled with cries of, Your Majesty. The little lowly Tonglan was lying on top of an intact wall and looking at the Empress, who was receiving the cheers of the people on the street. She was very excited. Her Majesty was her idol and had always been her idol. As for Yagüe. Yagüe. Tonglan thought about it and felt that Yagüe was quite smart. Even though he wasn't worthy of Her Majesty, there was probably no one else in the world who was worthy of her. He was considered pretty good, but he was a little weak. She jumped back to the courtyard and had to follow the Tong residents to welcome the Empress. The Empress looked at Hongwu deeply, turned around, and returned to Qi Shui's back. The group continued to move forward. They arrived at the entrance of the Tong residence in less than 10 meters. Someone stood in front of the door and shouted, Zhao Prince Consort, welcome the Imperial Edict. Coming soon. The hurried and panicked voice in the residence made many people feel a little strange. Shouldn't they already be waiting in front of the door? Ren Baqin hurried to the residence, followed by the people of the Tong residence. Ren Baqin immediately saw the Empress sitting on Qi Shui's back. She was wearing a red dress that was different from the usual red muslin. Instead, it was red silk with golden embroidery and looked extremely gorgeous. The Empress's hair was tied into a ponytail. Her eyebrows were like swords, her eyes were bright and clear, and her lips were red like a flame. Ren Baqian's eyes met the Empress's. Looking at her eyes, his heart skipped a beat. When the Empress saw Ren Baqin in red, her eyes were filled with tenderness like water. However, Ren Baqin still had to accept the imperial edict. This imperial edict was about the marriage between the Empress and Ren Baqin. It was just that it was being read out again at this time. Ren Baqin accepted the imperial edict and looked up at the Empress. Both of them smiled. Ren Baqin was beaming with joy while the Empress looked slightly shy. No matter how heroic she was still a woman and had many of the emotions that a woman should have. This was especially so when there were so many people watching. However, the valiant Empress had just defeated Hongwu. Furthermore, she had the might of a great victory. At this moment, the shyness on her face made people's hearts palpitate. Many people in the surroundings subconsciously swallowed their saliva. The Empress came down from Qi Shui's back and walked toward the Tong residence. She would spend the next half of the day there, where there was a banquet. She could only return to the palace at dusk. After that, there would be a wedding ceremony, celebration, and banquet. When she walked past Ren Baqin, the Empress suddenly smelled an extremely strong smell of alcohol. She thought about how Ren Baqin came out in a panic just now. She was fighting for her life outside, and he was drinking inside. Ren Baqin saw that the Empress's mood was turning cloudy, so he immediately took the initiative and said, Your Majesty, Sir Tong has caused me so much trouble. Whoosh! Chapter 838. In the courtyard of the Tong residence, there was a row of tables covered with red cloth. The walls and trees were decorated with lanterns and streamers, looking very festive. However, there wasn't any festive atmosphere in the courtyard at this time. The Empress sat in a chair and gently tapped her fingers on the table. Thump. 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 With every tap, the table would sink a little and the ground would tremble a little. Tong Jinye, what else do you have to say? The Empress asked faintly. His words were calm, and his expression was calm. However, no one could relax. Tong Jinye's eyes darted around like a merry-go-round. Oh, it's a bachelor's banquet. After all, Zhao Prince Consort's status will be different after his wedding, and he can't go out to drink and visit brothels as he pleases. I also have something to warn Zhao Prince Consort. Your Majesty is the Empress of the Aboriginals, and if Zhao Prince Consort dares to flirt, I won't let him off. It's a pity that drinking is a hindrance. Fortunately, nothing serious happened. Hee. Tong Jinye spoke slowly at first, but he spoke faster and faster toward the end. He even laughed. Ren Baqian was dumbfounded and cursed in his heart. Sure enough, people were forced to be like this. Tong Jinye had invented the bachelor's party in this world just like that. Also, weren't you the one who dragged me to the brothels? Old man, don't you have any shame? Who said that the Aboriginals were simple and straightforward? Is there a bachelor's banquet? The Empress looked to the side. If it was in the past, he would have been sent flying regardless of the reason. However, today was a joyous day, and the Empress gave him a chance. No. A loud voice came from behind the crowd. Your Majesty, there has never been such a thing before. Old man Tong is lying to you. At first, everyone was relieved to see the Empress soften her tone, but when they heard this voice, they immediately looked over. Qin Chuan's face was covered in dirt, and he was grinning from ear to ear. Qin Chuan, you old bastard, what are you doing here? The Tong residence didn't invite you today, and it's Her Majesty's wedding day. How dare you come out to make trouble? Tong Jinye flew into a rage. I'm just passing by. Qin Chuan laughed. Goodbye. Stand there. The Empress's face was cold. Everything had been arranged for today. They would set off in the morning and stay at the Tong residence in the afternoon. During this period, only the people from the Ministry of Rights and the Tong residence would be present. Qin Chuan was just passing by. Ha! Give the 2 machetes to them, the Empress said coldly. Everyone looked at each other, and the Empress spoke again. Are you still not going? Your Majesty, I've been wronged. If you want to punish someone, shouldn't you add Zhao Prince Consort as well? Tong Jinye, the old man, still hadn't given up. Anyway, he knew that His Majesty had changed. All he had to do was to drag Zhao Prince Consort into the punishment. In any case, he was a Cardinal Heaven expert and could withstand a beating. He was merely a Kismet Heaven. The Empress glared at him coldly. Ren Baqian pondered for a long time and asked in surprise, Your Majesty, you actually know about Gui too? The teacup in front of the Empress flew out. It smashed into Tong Jinye's head. Take 3 axes. Your Majesty, I'm innocent. Ren Baqian immediately cried out. The plate in front of the Empress also flew out. It still hit Tong Jinye's head. Tong Jinye felt wronged. Why did you hit me again? 10 minutes later, the Empress pointed to the corner of the wall and ordered, dig. Your Majesty, it's a big day. Xian Hua, the Minister of Rights, spoke frankly. Add 1 more axis. The Empress didn't even raise her head. It's a big day, yet they're still causing trouble. It's really not right. Xian Hua smoothly continued without pausing. Ren Baqian thought about it and decided to bury them since their heads would still be exposed. The three of them would obediently dig 3 pits. You, go down. The Empress pointed at Tong Jinye and Qin Chuan. You are responsible for burying them. She then pointed at Ren Baqian. On the day of his wedding, Ren Baqian was wearing festive new clothes as he buried people. After burying 1 layer of soil and compacting it, he continued to bury another layer. After a lot of effort, only 2 heads were left. Tong Jinye sneered at Ren Baqian. In any case, you are the one who buries us. Don't be fooled by how happy you are now, but aren't you getting the same treatment as us? After Ren Baqian was done burying the 2 people, he saw that the Empress didn't say anything and stood obediently at the side. It was always better to bury less. He wondered if he should take off his clothes when he jumped down later. 5 minutes passed, a quarter of an hour passed, everyone was waiting for the next step, but the Empress closed her eyes and sat there to rest. Tong Jinye's head was exposed. He first sneered, then looked expectant, then doubtful, and finally felt wronged. Your Majesty, Zhao Prince Consort is still standing there. Stand there obediently. The Empress said coldly. Tong Jinye and Qin Chuan's faces turned green. Your Majesty, this is unfair. The people from the Ministry of Rites who were standing at the side almost burst out laughing. Their faces were all distorted and had weird expressions. Ren Baqian looked down at the 2 of them and was in a good mood. He was just short of singing, "We are different." Tong Jinye and Qin Chuan were trying to cheat him. These 2 were really getting what they asked for. At this time, the Empress was feeling very depressed. Even though she was shy about the wedding, she was still somewhat looking forward to it. However, a good wedding had been ruined by these few people. Am I usually too benevolent? If it weren't for the celebratory banquet tonight, these 2 people would have been hung from the top of the city wall. On the contrary, everyone else had different thoughts. The people from the Ministry of Rites were happy to see these 2 old fellows looking for trouble every day. It was time to teach them a lesson. As for the people from the Tong residence, they were helpless. On the contrary, Tong Lan was in high spirits. She wanted to have this kind of awe-inspiring power in the future. After staying in the Tong residence for the whole afternoon, Ren Baqian stood there for the whole afternoon. Tong Jinye and Qin Chuan were buried there with grievances on their faces. Your Majesty, it's almost time. Prepare to return. Xianhua came to the Empress's side and said. Ren Baqian, who was sitting quietly like an old Buddha, unconsciously shifted his gaze to the other side. The Empress glared at him. The meaning in her eyes was clear: if you cause any more trouble, I'll teach you a lesson. After leaving the Tong residence, the 2 of them started to quarrel again. Usually, a man would hug a woman to show off his strength and snatch her back. What should he do now? Your Majesty, do you want me to carry you? Ren Baqian felt that he should show off. He felt that he was good at princess carrying. The Empress put one hand on his waist and exerted a little force. Ren Baqian spun 90 degrees in the air and was carried in her arms like a princess. A woman who weighed less than 50 kilograms carried a burly man who weighed more than 150 kilograms out of the Tong residence. Many of the onlookers outside came back after having their meals and cheered again when they saw the Empress. Many people from the Yun nation were also watching from afar. He doesn't care about his reputation at all. What Zhao Prince Consort? Hee. Many people looked at him with disdain. Someone smacked his lips and suddenly said, "Why do I feel a little envious?" Everyone looked at him and then moved 3 meters away from him. Although 99% of the men were envious, how could they say this? Chapter 839. Under the curtain of night, the entire palace was brightly lit. It wasn't just the street lamps, but the palace and trees were also full of red lanterns. It was unknown how long these lanterns had been there. All kinds of silk were wrapped around the trees like gorgeous flowers. At this time, there was a hubbub of voices, laughter, and cheers inside and outside Zichan Palace Hall. Inside the hall were the Aboriginal court officials, and outside the hall were the people from the Yun Nation and Tianjin Basin. Renbachen sat beside the Empress, holding a piece of red silk with one hand, and watched Xianhua, the Minister of Rites, perform a striptease. The other end of the red silk was in the Empress's hand. Following the wild laughter of many burly men and enchanting women, Xianhua was only left with a piece of undergarment. I couldn't tell that the Minister of Rites isn't an ordinary person. Renbachen whispered in admiration. This was the first time he had sat up here and looked at the officials below. To be honest, it wasn't very comfortable. After all, every move at the top was watched, and he couldn't do many small things. At first, he was still sitting calmly, but as the atmosphere in the hall became more and more lively, he felt like there were nails under his butt, and he couldn't sit still any longer. Then, the Empress pinched him on the arm, and he immediately sat up straight again. Watch my last dance. I'll let you see my big treasure. Xianhua was a few years younger than Tong Zhengya and Qin Chuan. He had thick eyebrows and big eyes, and he looked like a decent person. However, his face was flushed, and he was wearing a piece of undergarment to show off his muscles. His hands were even grabbing the undergarment. What the F***ck? No one stopped him. Renbachen's expression was very interesting. Xianhua was the Minister of Rites. He was usually quiet, but today, he was showing his true colors. Great! Many people below applauded and cheered. When Renbachen realized that no one stopped him, he immediately considered whether to cover the Empress's eyes. Whoa! Before Renbachen could think about it, Xianhua screamed and threw his undergarment into the air. Renbachen saw the Empress lowering her head to hide her expression and then looked at Tu Wan and the female officials from the Ministry of Revenue who were applauding and whistling. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It seemed like this wasn't the first time this had happened. Ever since he had arrived, he had been running around everywhere other than fighting battles. He had only held a few banquets, and the finale of each banquet was always Tong Zhengya and Qin Chuan's mortal combat. This was the first time he had seen such a grand finale. Wrong, not the finale. After Xianhua jumped down, a few more people from the Ministry of Personnel jumped up. On the other side, after Tong Zhengya and Qin Chuan had experienced an entire afternoon and half a night of depression due to Her Majesty's unfairness, they began to rub their palms and prepare for the finale. As expected of the barbarian tribe, they truly live up to their name. Outside Zichan Palace Hall, a portion of the people could see the situation inside. A man at one of the tables chuckled softly. He felt that he had suppressed his voice so low that no one but his companions could hear him. Aren't you afraid of dirtying your eyes? His companion whispered. Although the Yun Nation had been annihilated, most of the Yun Nation's people still viewed the Aboriginals as barbarians and looked down on them from the bottom of their hearts. Especially when he saw the scene in the main hall, he could not help but mock. Although they didn't dare to let others hear it, they weren't worried about it since they were companions. At a table not far away, a man with a wide forehead and slightly sunken eyes turned his head to look, his hand tightly gripping his chopsticks. Ping tang. What's wrong? Someone immediately noticed his abnormality. Most of the people who came this time were from the embroidered uniform guards. Although their positions weren't high enough, they were still allowed to attend the feast as an exception, just like the people of the Yun Nation. However, the Jing tribe people weren't as indignant as the people of the Yun Nation. On the one hand, most of the Jing tribe experts had died, and the rest had joined the embroidered uniform guards. On the other hand, the things that Renbachen had promised them were being realized bit by bit. He didn't deceive them, which made them very grateful and willing to serve him. Didn't the Jing tribe suffer in Tianjin Basin for so many years just to get out? As for the nation, it didn't matter. The Han nation had been destroyed for more than 70 years, and they had been nominally ruled by the Aboriginals for more than 70 years. Furthermore, the embroidered uniform guards received points for every mission they completed. As long as they had enough points to exchange for the herbs or other items they needed, they would receive them after 2 to 3 months. Nowadays, points were more valuable than gold and silver in the embroidered uniform guards. The man called Ping Tang snorted and repeated the words that he had just heard. The expressions of the others changed. Did you hear me correctly? My skills are all in my ears. I can even hear the fluttering of mosquitoes and flies from 100 meters away. Ping Tang said. These people of the Yun nation are really reckless. How dare they spout nonsense in this place? Don't make a big fuss. After all, today is a joyous day. If there is any disturbance, Sir Ren will definitely be angry. If we don't handle it well, we might even be implicated. We will follow them in a while, figure out their identities, and report to Sir Ren. That will be a meritorious service. An experienced person immediately said. Your Majesty, it's time. At this time, the hall was filled with chaos, but there was still a loyal official from the Ministry of Rights. Upon hearing this, the Empress and Renbochin stood up. Do as you wish, the Empress said faintly and left through the side door. Renbochin naturally followed behind her. When they were outside the hall, Renbochin called for a guard and said, Send the water of life that I prepared. Yes. Tell them that this is the blood of courage. What water of life? What blood of courage? The Empress stopped in her tracks and turned her head to ask. The names sounded very powerful, 96% vodka. Renbochin said straightforwardly. If it was given to them before, they might not drink it. However, it was hard to say now. He had been prepared from the beginning, but he definitely couldn't let that old fool Tong Jinye go. He couldn't just give it to him, right? Anyone would know that there was a problem, let alone Tong Jinye, who was a cunning old man. He might as well give it all to him since none of them were good stuff. He didn't force them to drink it either. He just told them that this was the blood of courage. 96%. I remember you saying that the erguoto I drank was 38% and 40%. What's the difference? The Empress asked casually. It's just a little stronger. Renbochin answered honestly. Do you have any bad intentions? The Empress looked at him with bright eyes. Renbochin understood the Empress, and she understood him. He was usually fine, but he would come up with some bad ideas from time to time. Your Majesty, you are thinking too much. This is just a little higher in concentration. If you drink 1 liter of erguoto, 1 liter of this is enough. Renbochin said with a straight face. The Empress stood there and pondered for a while before immediately understanding. They drank fruit wine just now, and 2 to 3 liters of it is equivalent to 1 liter of erguoto. If they drink it as fruit wine, they aren't fools. Renbochin might have said otherwise, but he thought so in his heart. Especially now that all of them had drunk too much. Plus, what you said. The Empress shook her head slightly and rolled her eyes at him. You are too bad. Renbochin felt a surge of warmth in his heart when he saw the Empress rolling her eyes. Fortunately, the ceremonial officer urged, Your Majesty, time is up. We can't delay any longer. According to the royal families of other countries, the Emperor, Empress, and concubines had their own palace. However, Aboriginal women were fierce, and the Aboriginals had low desires. They had been monogamous since the founding of the country. Therefore, they didn't even change their palace. It was still the same couch that was 2 meters long and more than 3 meters wide. It was covered with a red cloth and hung with 100 children's curtains. Not far from the couch was a table with a bottle gourd that was cut into two and hollowed out. The two halves of the gourd were connected by a red thread. In addition, a pair of huge red candles with golden dragon and phoenix patterns stood on the table. Qin Yuan, Hong Yuan, and several female officials were waiting by the side. The entire palace was filled with an ambiguous atmosphere. The Empress walked back to the palace, slowed down, and her breathing became indistinct. She seemed to be adjusting her mood. Ren Baqian turned to look at her and asked, "Nervous?" "A little." It was rare for the Empress to be honest and tell the truth. "Your Majesty and Zhao Prince Consort, please pay your respects to heaven and the ancestors," the ceremonial officer said from behind. The two of them lit incense sticks and paid their respects to heaven and the ancestors in the palace. "Your Majesty and Zhao Prince Consort, please pay your respects." The Empress and Ren Baqian each held half a bottle gourd while Hong Yuan and Qin Yuan poured wine for them. The Empress held the bottle gourd in her hand and looked at Ren Baqian. After paying their respects, the two of them would officially be husband and wife. It seemed like the simplest etiquette, but it had the most solemn meaning. Of course, he was willing. However, there were still some feelings in her heart. The person she met a few years ago on the side of the road was now her husband. The affairs of the world were really unpredictable. The same thought appeared in Ren Baqian's mind. A few years ago, he almost lost his head. Then, he saw the heroic woman in the carriage, and now, she was his wife. The ceremonial officer stood there and saw that the two of them were motionless, so he had no choice but to say, "Please drink up." The Empress put the bottle gourd to her mouth, closed her eyes slightly, raised her head, and drank the wine. Bitter. Bottle gourd was bitter to begin with. It meant sharing joys and sorrows. After drinking, the two of them opened their eyes and looked at each other. The Empress's eyes were filled with tenderness, and it was exceptionally moving to see such a look in her eyes. Ren Baqian squinted his eyes and said, "Your Majesty, drink again tomorrow. I will add sugar for you." The Empress immediately smiled brightly and said, "Nonsense." Chapter 840. This bottle is exquisite. It's made of glass, right? What's written on it? Tong Jingye's face was flushed as he held the bottle and exclaimed in admiration. He burped and emitted the smell of alcohol. "The blood of a warrior. I'm going to have a taste then." Tong Jingye gulped it down, and the strong smell of alcohol filled his mouth. Then, he felt like a knife had slid down his throat and reached his stomach, lighting a fire. "Pfft, what's this?" Tong Jingye was shocked. This couldn't be considered alcohol anymore. It was like swallowing a knife into his stomach. "Zhao Prince Consort, you are really ruthless." Everyone was puzzled as they each held a bottle and took a sip. Pfft, pfft, the sound of alcohol being sprayed was endless. Although they were Cardinal Heaven experts and had strong bodies, it didn't mean that they didn't feel anything. Their internal organs were especially soft, and this mouthful was like a sea of fire in their stomachs. One had to know that the alcohol that they usually drank was less than 10% alcohol. Occasionally, they would get a bottle of 38% to 40% alcohol from the Empress, which was considered the highest alcohol they could get. It was practically like a burning knife. This was the water of life with 96 degrees of alcohol, which was almost equivalent to pure alcohol. Ha 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 ha. This is indeed the blood of a warrior. How can a woman like you drink it? Qin Chuan saw Tong Jingye's expression and immediately laughed provocatively. "Old bastard, do you want to compete?" The veins on Tong Jingye's forehead were bulging. "If it weren't for you in the afternoon, I would have dragged Zhao Prince Consort down with me." Coupled with all the previous incidents, this feud couldn't be washed away even with rivers and lakes. You actually have the guts to do that?" Qin Chuan's face was full of shock, which made Tong Zhenye want to eat him alive. Come, come, come. Whoever can't drink it first loses. The onlookers immediately piled the liquor boxes around them and applauded. They watched with great interest as the two of them competed in alcohol. The two of them tilted their heads back and gulped down a bottle. Then, their faces immediately became as colorful as a mill. Today is Her Majesty's wedding day. If you are willing to admit defeat, I will let you off. The colors of red, white, blue, and purple on Tong Zhenye's face turned red, white, blue, and purple before finally settling on his back. Steam almost came out from his forehead as he glared at Qin Chuan fiercely. Why would this old man be afraid of you, you bastard? Qin Chuan also glared at him fiercely. Drink another bottle. Do you admit defeat? You talk too much nonsense. The two of them had been enemies for decades. As long as they met, they would rather die than take a step back. After one crate, the two of them began to stagger. After consuming 2 boxes, Tong Zhenye staggered a few steps, turned around, and spat out a mouthful of alcohol directly onto the palace lantern in the corner. Boom! A huge fireball. Everyone, the dozens of bigwigs present, stared blankly at the rising fireball in the corner. What was going on? Someone tried to spit out the wine in his mouth. Boom! Another huge fireball appeared. Oh my God, this water is on fire. What the hell is this? Someone spat out another huge fireball. Another huge fireball. Another one. It's on fire. Minister of Revenue Tu Wan rubbed her forehead, her eyes blurred. It's on fire. Minister of Justice Shui Yan deeply agreed. He knocked his head from time to time, feeling dizzy. Xian Hua laughed, ah ha 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 ha. At this time, in a corner of Zichen Palace, the cloth curtain was already burning. Minister of the Ministry of War Lian Liang was in a daze for a while. He shook his head and stepped forward. Sirs, let me do it. He took a step forward a few meters and slapped with his palm. The wind howled in the air, and the blazing flames seemed to be suppressed. Boom! When the dust dissipated, the cloth curtain, the flame, and even half of the wall had disappeared without a trace. This old man is old and can't compare to the young people. I'm going back to rest. Shi Qing strolled back with his hands behind his back. I'm tired too. Tu Wan rubbed her forehead and walked out of Zichen Palace Hall. A few people from the Ministry of Rites fastened their loincloths and carried their clothes out. In a short while, only Tong Zhenye, Qin Chuan, who was lying on the ground and spitting bubbles, and Lian Liang, who was still in a daze. In the bedchamber, the big red tent was tightly enclosed, with only one side open. Ren Baqian and the Empress sat there, and an ambiguous atmosphere filled the air around them. The female official, Qing Yuan, and Hong Wuan had already been driven out by the Empress. Although there were still some formalities that hadn't been completed, the Empress was already tired of the cumbersome and useless procedures. Ren Baqian hugged the Empress, placed his palms on her waist, rested his chin on her shoulder, and gently sniffed her cheek. It was filled with a delicate fragrance. Your Majesty, your heart is beating very fast. Ren Baqian felt that there was a small elephant jumping in the Empress's chest. It was jumping rather happily. Ren Baqian felt that it was time for the two of them to get on the bed and proceed to the next step. It was normal for the Empress to be a little flustered, but why was he a little flustered as well? After thinking about it, it was probably because the two of them had been together for a long time. Now that they were suddenly going to take a step forward, it was as if there was a layer in front of them, and they had to break through that layer first. Your Majesty, I learned a martial art in Qingxin Palace Hall a few days ago, and I haven't told you about it. Ren Baqian whispered into the Empress's ear. What is it? The Empress was nervous, and she subconsciously asked after hearing what he said. Then, she felt a big hand climbing onto her chest and heard the words, "Grasping is the dragon's claw." The Empress's body immediately tensed up. Renbochin didn't proceed to the next step. He could see that the Empress's body was tensed up like a cat with its fur standing on end. If he moved a little more, his face would definitely be scratched. While whispering in the Empress's ear, Renbochin pressed his palms on that softness and didn't move at all. He just felt the softness in his palms and the strong beating in her chest. After a while, he felt that the Empress's body had begun to relax. Renbochin then carried her on his lap and turned her face to him. He stroked the other cheek of the Empress with one hand and made her look at him. Then, he lowered his head and kissed her gently. The two of them were immersed in the kiss. From time to time, Renbochin would open her pearly white teeth and let the tip of his tongue penetrate deep. There seems to be a sound. The Empress raised her head and looked out of the palace hall. The sound seemed to be coming from Zichan Palace Hall. Don't worry about them. What can happen to dozens of Cardinal Heaven experts? Renbochin laughed. At this time, he couldn't let outsiders disturb their wedding night. Renbochin took off the Empress's red dress. When his fingers were dancing on the white undergarment, the Empress pressed him down and asked, "What do you want to do?" "It's not what I want to do, it's what your Majesty wants to do. As the saying goes, drink the strongest wine and ride the wildest horse. Right now, I'm that wildest horse." Renbochin breathed into the Empress's ear. The Empress subconsciously shrunk her neck, then looked up at Renbochin and asked, "The wildest horse?" Chapter 841. The red candlelight dimmed the tent. Renbochin and the Empress rolled onto the bed. Renbochin hooked his leg, and the red curtain fell, separating the inside and the outside into two different worlds. Only a little candlelight penetrated the red curtain. The Empress was wearing a white inner garment, and her braided hair hung down from her face. Renbochin lifted his upper body, hugged the Empress, and kissed her on the mouth. One of his hands was placed on the Empress's waist while the other hand was caressing her back and gently moving around. The Empress snorted, blushed, lowered her eyelids, and allowed him to do whatever he wanted. After a long kiss, Renbochin gently pulled the Empress's collar open, revealing a breathtaking scene. The Empress's figure didn't need to be changed, and it happened to be the perfect size. Her collarbone was sexy and provocative, and it drew a seductive arc downwards. The highest point of her pink breast stood erect. Her skin was as delicate as mutton fat, and it was so fair that it made people go crazy. Coupled with the Empress's shy expression and the scenery between the gaps of her white inner garment, Renbochin felt as if a fire had been ignited in his heart. In the blink of an eye, it became a prairie fire. This is the most beautiful masterpiece of the Creator. Nothing in the world can compare to it. Renbochin exclaimed in admiration. He used his finger to gently stroke the upper body of the Empress. When he passed a certain point, she snorted again, and a rose-like pink spread from her neck down. The Empress opened her eyes a little, gently bit her lip, and squinted her eyes, which were full of temptation. Renbochin flipped her over, and the white inner garment was thrown to the side. Her upper body was completely exposed to his eyes. Although there was only a little candlelight penetrating the red curtain, it was enough for Renbochin to see everything clearly. Renbochin leaned over and kissed her from her neck all the way across her peaks and plains. He bit the edge of the safety pants at her lower abdomen and gently pulled it down. Following his movements, that magnificent pink spread all over her body. However, her legs were tightly clamped, making it difficult for Renbochin to pull her down. Rip, Renbochin felt that having good teeth at critical moments was indeed a gift. Looking at the safety pants that only covered her thighs, it was even more touching. If there was a god in this world, he believed that the one in front of him was the one. He slowly took off his clothes, revealing a glowing humanoid figure. "Your Majesty, let me show you my shining treasure." As he spoke shamelessly, he kissed her from her lower abdomen upwards. Omitting 5,000 words, their naked bodies were entangled together. One was glowing, while the other was pink. At this point in time, the Empress's eyes were almost tightly shut. Occasionally, she would let out a soft hum from her nose. When Renbochin mounted the horse. Boom! Renbochin, work hard. The flames in Renbochin's mind receded like the tide, leaving behind only one sentence: what the F***ck. Knock on the door and deliver the chicken, but you can't knock on the door. Even if his body was extremely slippery, even if he was covered in oil, his head would still bleed when he hit the wall. Furthermore, it was a reinforced concrete wall. Damn it, don't show your fear. Renbochin pressed his body on top of the Empress and knocked hard on the door while kissing her. After a while, even if the Empress didn't know much about human affairs, she still sensed something. She opened her eyes slightly and saw Renbochin gritting his teeth. She bit her lip and suddenly smiled. Then, she turned around and pressed Renbochin down. The two of them exchanged positions. "You are the wildest horse," the Empress said softly with a blushing face. Her voice was very soft, but it unexpectedly revealed an indescribable feeling. Then, she took a deep breath, raised her head slightly, and put on a superior expression. She looked down at Renbochin and said, "I am the Empress." Her cheeks were still blushing, and the pink on her body hadn't faded. However, her posture revealed the Empress's temperament to the fullest. With her exquisite body sitting on top of him, he could see everything clearly, adding fuel to the fire in Renbochin's body. Renbochin was now confident that he could smash through anything except a concrete wall. Then, he was faced with a concrete wall. The Empress bit her lower lip, placed her palms under her body, and touched the cannon. Then, she looked up at Renbochin with a seductive gaze. Then, her body slowly sank. He didn't know how the Empress controlled her body, but he realized that the door had opened, the Empress's body suddenly tensed up, and after a while, it slowly softened. Soft groans that could make one's heart skip a beat came from the red tent. Then, the sound gradually became louder, and the voices of a man and a woman intertwined like two people in the tent. However, the creaking sound of the wooden bed was even louder, and it almost completely covered the voices of the two people. Creak. Creak. Creak, the wooden bed shook violently. Boom. The wooden bed, which was said to be made of ironwood that was as hard as steel, suddenly collapsed. The red tent then completely enveloped the scattered wooden bed and the two people. Qin Yuan and Hong Luan had been standing outside the hall with their ears pricked up. Occasionally, they would hear a few soft moans that carried an indescribable flavor, causing the two of them to blush. Upon hearing this loud noise, they rushed into the bedroom and shouted, "Your Majesty! Zhao Prince Consort! Are you all right?" The place where the wooden bed used to be was now shrouded in a red tent, and they could vaguely see a human figure inside. "All of you. Retreat. Without my order, everyone. Retreat. 100 meters away." The Empress's voice was intermittent, and it sounded as if she was enduring something. This voice made Qin Yuan and Hong Luan blush spread from their foreheads to the soles of their feet. They hurriedly lowered their heads and ran out. After running out, they shouted in panic, "Her Majesty has ordered everyone to retreat 100 meters away." "Why are you two panicking?" Xianzhi appeared in the darkness and asked coldly. "Your Majesty. That. Your Majesty." The two of them blushed and didn't know what to say. "What's wrong with Her Majesty?" "Her Majesty is fine, but she wants everyone to retreat 100 meters away," Qin Yuan and Hong Luan hurriedly said. Seeing their expressions and tone, Xianzhi was even more puzzled. I'm going to see Her Majesty. You can't go. Qin Yuan and Hong Wuan wanted to stop her, but how could they? In a flash, Xianjia passed them and went straight to the bedroom. However, before she reached the entrance of the bedroom, she heard a sound that sounded like a cat's meowing. What puzzled her was that the sound sounded like Her Majesty's. When she arrived at the entrance of the bedroom, she saw a ball of red rolling on the ground. A sound that sounded like a cat's meowing and a low growl were coming from it. During this pause, Qin Yuan and Hong Wuan rushed over, blocked her way, and said in a low voice, "You can't go in." The two of them blushed again when they heard the sound from inside the hall. What's wrong with Her Majesty? Xianjia also felt that something was wrong, but she still couldn't figure out what was going on. She inexplicably recalled that when she was being electrocuted, she seemed to have made a similar sound. Strange, Her Majesty's wedding. Her Majesty is consummating the marriage. Qin Yuan and Hong Wuan blushed and wished they could bite Xianjia to death. Did she have to make it so clear? Oh, this is consummating the marriage. Xianjia nodded and listened to the sound inside. Although it was a little strange, it seemed like nothing was wrong. What was the order just now? Of course it's Her Majesty's. You mustn't go in now. Qin Yuan and Hong Wuan said hurriedly. Xianjia was stunned for a moment. Then, she thought of something and flashed back into the darkness. A voice came from the darkness, "Everyone is not to go within 100 meters of the bedroom." Seeing this, Qin Yuan and Hong Wuan finally heaved a sigh of relief. They turned their heads and looked into the hole. The ball of red was still in the hole, rolling from time to time. Then, a human figure would sit up and lie down after a while. The sound in the hall was getting louder. Clang! Even the table was knocked over. Should we go and put the mirror away? That mirror is Her Majesty's favorite item. Qin Yuan peeked into the hall and asked Hong Wuan softly. If you want to go, you go. Hong Wuan glared at her. How could she not know what was important? Not long after the two of them left quietly, they heard the sound of glass shattering from inside the hall. Qin Yuan stuck out her tongue. She thought that the mirror must have been broken. Qin Yuan and Hong Wuan hid in the shadows. At this time, the sun was already above their heads, but the two people in the hall still hadn't come out. Once they got close to the hall, they could hear the sound coming from inside that made them blush. Chapter 842. Under the shade of a tree, Qin Yuan and Hong Wuan looked at each other and saw the helplessness in each other's eyes. Xianjia landed in front of them and asked, "Is Her Majesty not out yet?" They shook their heads. "If Her Majesty comes out, tell her that the Great Elder is here to see her." Xianjia said faintly and turned to look in the direction of the bedroom. At this time, everyone was outside the bedroom, and they could only see the upper half of the bedroom through the wall. If they listened carefully, they could hear some sounds coming from there. It had been 3 days. The two had been in the bedroom for 3 days. It took so long to consummate the marriage. Xianjia began to be curious about what they were doing inside. The food that was delivered for the past 2 days was placed in the sect, but it was brought back in its original condition. Qin Yuan muttered. With Her Majesty's strength, it won't affect her even if she doesn't eat for a few days, Xianjia said faintly. Without thinking further, she turned and walked outside. I'll inform the Great Elder. However, before she walked 100 meters, she heard a loud noise behind her. Xianjia turned around and was shocked. The roof of the bedroom was gone. Their original positions were shrouded in dust that soared into the sky. The loud noise caused the entire palace to be in chaos. Xianjia rushed to the bedroom in a few steps, but it was already completely covered in dust, and she couldn't see what was going on inside. Great Commander! Qin Yuan and Hong Wuan opened their mouths wide and panicked. They finally found their backbone when they saw Xianjia. Quickly save Her Majesty. Xianjia didn't even look at them and said, "This won't hurt Her Majesty." She then raised her voice and said, "Everyone, don't panic." After stabilizing the situation, she slapped forward with her palm. With a piercing sound, a hole appeared in the dust in front of her, but it was quickly filled by the surrounding dust. Seeing that this method didn't work, Xianjia pondered for a while and rushed inside. "Retreat." The Empress's voice suddenly came from the dust, causing Xianjia to stop. The Empress's voice continued, "Call the people from the clinic over." "Your Majesty, are you injured?" Xianjia was surprised. "It's not me. Go quickly." The Empress's voice carried a tinge of tiredness and an indescribable feeling. Knowing that it wasn't the Empress who was injured, Xianjia felt at ease and cupped her hands in the direction of the Empress's voice. She didn't care if the Empress could see her, as this had long become a habit. Then, he retreated and sent someone to inform the doctors. Just as Xianjia left, a red shadow pierced through the dust and disappeared into a side hall at the side. At the same time, a voice came from afar. "No one is allowed to come near. Qin Yuan and Hong Wuan, bring the clothes for me and Zhao Prince Consort over." Qin Yuan and Hong Wuan stuck out their tongues. The Empress's favorite clothes were all buried in her bedroom. Fortunately, there were people in charge of clothes in the palace. They split up to retrieve undergarments and red muslin, as well as Pingle Park to retrieve Renbachian's clothes. At the same time, he also asked the Imperial Kitchen to make some food. Meat, a lot. They felt that Her Majesty and Renbachian were probably hungry. It wasn't should, it was definitely. The two did not leave the house for 3 days. When they arrived at the side hall, they blushed when they recalled the sounds and things that happened in the hall for the past 3 days. As soon as they entered the side hall, they saw the Empress sitting there wrapped in a red cloth. The whip on her head had long been untied and was hanging down in strands. There seemed to be water stains and some dust on it. The red cloth that the Empress was wearing couldn't be considered clean either, as water stains and dust were mixed together. She looked a little disheveled, but when they looked up at the Empress, they realized that she seemed a little different. There seemed to be an additional layer of luster on her skin, and there was a tinge of redness in her fair complexion. Zhao Prince Consort was lying beside the Empress with only a torn piece of red cloth covering his lower body. They were shocked when they saw Zhao Prince Consort. Zhao Prince Consort's face was pale, and he had lost a lot of weight. "Zhao Prince Consort, this is..." They subconsciously mumbled. "It's nothing serious," the Empress said faintly as her face blushed again. At this time, Renbachian seemed to have lost a lot of weight, but his body was fine and even better than before. However, just now, did she seem to have broken his hip bone. Then, he fainted. It was unintentional. Her mind was blank at that time. They didn't dare to ask any more questions and put the clothes aside before asking, "Your Majesty, do you want me to prepare some food and a bath?" "Get someone to prepare and leave. Bring the people from the doctor's office over," the Empress said without looking up. After they left, she placed her hand on Renbachian's face and ran a finger from his cheek to his chin, then to his chest. She didn't know what kind of expression she should make when she thought about the craziness of the past few days. Most of the time, she didn't even know what she was doing. "It's all this guy's fault," the Empress muttered. It was like this. After a while, someone from the doctor's office arrived. It was the chief of the clinic. Without hesitation, he checked Renbachian's physical condition and reported, "Zhao Prince Consort has a fracture caused by an external impact. This is easy to deal with. In addition, he has a lack of essence blood and an empty sea of marrow. I heard that Your Majesty and Zhao Prince Consort haven't left the palace for 3 days. so you have to take care of your health. However, it's strange that people with a lack of essence blood should be dispirited and listless, but I see that Zhao Prince Consort's body is full of vitality and is even better than before. This vitality seems to be pouring in from the outside. The doctor said thoughtfully, could this be the legendary dual cultivation method? When I was traveling in the Yun nation, I heard about the coexistence of yin and yang. The dual cultivation method complements yin and yang, especially for the first time. With your Majesty's strength, if it is poured into Zhao Prince Consort's body. The Empress's face was as red as blood. This person in front of her was full of nonsense. If he was Tong Jinye or Qin Chuan, she would have killed him right now. She hurriedly said, cure him and wake him up. After saying this, she fled, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. The Empress felt that she had never been in such a sorry state in her life. A moment later, the Empress was soaking in the pool. The redness on her face hadn't dissipated, and her head was covered with flowers, qi, and energy. Go to Hongluan and keep an eye on Zhao Prince Consort. Inform me when he wakes up. After Hongluan left, the Empress closed her eyes in the pool. The feelings from the past few days hadn't dissipated, and her mind was in a mess. Qin Yuan knelt behind the Empress and massaged her shoulders as she said softly, Your Majesty, Great Elder requests to see you before noon. I got it. Since that night, how much time has passed? The Empress asked with her eyes closed. Your Majesty, it has been 3 days. Qin Yuan said softly. Then, she felt the Empress's body stiffen. 3 days. The Empress opened her eyes and asked subconsciously. So much time had passed. At that time, although she could see the light from outside the hall, she had lost all sense of time. Just as Chen Baokuan had said, 3 days had passed. However, her mind was focused on other things just now and didn't pay much attention to this. Yes. The Empress thought about how those old fellows would laugh at her for not leaving the palace for 3 days with that fellow. Immediately, she was covered with flowers, qi, and qi. Chapter 843. In the darkness, it was like the universe. In the distance, there was a star that emitted light and heat. Although he knew that he couldn't look at the star directly, Renbaqian didn't feel dazzled when he looked at it. The light only made him feel warm. At this time, Renbaqian didn't even have a body, so he didn't know what senses he was using to look at the star. This was his sea of knowledge, and the way he saw things probably depended entirely on his own habits. He was used to seeing things with his eyes, so even without a body, the angle of observation in his sea of knowledge was still a pair of non-existent eyes. This thought popped up in Renbaqian's mind. Then, he began to wonder why he was here, and he recalled what happened before. The Empress was drenched in sweat. At first, he and the Empress were completely driven by desire, but after reason emerged, he began to use the dual cultivation technique that Librarian Lin gave him. Essence, qi, and spirit were completely connected to the Empress. Then, they cycled from his body to the Empress's body and back again. Each cycle would take something from his body and bring something back from the Empress's body at the same time. After an unknown period of time, the cycle became faster and faster. Then, his hip bone was broken, and he fainted. Realizing this problem, Renbaqian wanted to facepalm. Damn, what a great humiliation. Breaking my hip bone on the night of our wedding night. Can I still be human? I have a huge physique of 120 kilograms. I have the strength of a bear and the physique of a bear. Well, in front of the Empress, a bear has become a panda. And a small panda. After struggling for a while, Renbaqian suddenly noticed that there were a few more things around him. Around him, there were 3 planets that were orbiting in a fixed orbit. One of them was khaki, one was red, and the last one was half aqua blue. White, green, and khaki were mixed together, modeled on it. It's finally formed. Renbochin immediately put aside the matter that he was too ashamed to talk about and focused all his attention on these 3 planets. When he focused on a planet, the distance between the planet and it would become smaller and larger in his field of vision. In other words, he was pulled closer to the planet. What attracted him the most was naturally the planet with blue, white, green, and khaki colors. The earthy yellow and red planets were missing something, and this one was obviously closer to Earth, which made him subconsciously think of a question. Will there be creatures here? If living creatures appeared in his sea of consciousness, then what were these living creatures? As soon as this thought popped up in his mind, he tossed it aside. The sea of consciousness could have the universe and even planets. It could also have rocks, wood, flames, and oceans. However, it was impossible for life to exist. Because his sea of consciousness lacked the most important thing, the soul. Of course, those stones, wood, and flames were completely constructed in the sea of consciousness. They had the same form as the real world, but they were not the same essence. In essence, these things could be said to be made up of his divine sense. Not the molecules, atoms, and particles of reality. However, he could use his divine sense to simulate inanimate objects in his sea of consciousness, but he couldn't simulate living things. With these thoughts in mind, he pulled himself closer to the blue planet that occupied half of the planet's surface. Then, he got bigger and bigger, and he felt like he was falling toward the planet. He skimmed over the ocean, the mountains, and finally stopped above a plain. Then, he saw a living creature other than himself. The metal chain laid its body on the ground and lazily basked in the sun. From time to time, it would move its head or tail. In any case, both sides looked the same. Its entire body was exactly the same. If the metal chain was here, then there was the golden spear. As Renbochin was thinking about this, he seemed to see a towering peak in the distance. The golden spear had somehow become thousands of meters tall and was standing there. Renbochin saw these 2 fellows and then looked around. Most of the surroundings were yellow soil, and there were huge trees growing on the ground. These trees were directly composed of the wood element. As a result, there were tall trees on the newly formed planet that were as tall as the 60,000 mountains. Earth, wood, and water were all revealed in front of him. As for fire, Renbochin guessed that it should be underground. The same was true for metal. In addition, there were wind, ice, and desert, which were variations of the 5 elements. Everything that a planet should have was already here. Except for life. However, this planet alone was already a huge surprise. It was an expected surprise. Other people carried a spring and a space with them. Who was as awesome as him? Carrying a universe with them. After that, Renbochin began to test what he could do on this planet. I said, let there be mountains. Renbochin's voice rumbled in the sky, and the metal chain on the ground jumped up. One end of it circled 360 times, but it still couldn't find Renbochin's position. In Renbochin's field of vision, the ground was shaking and cracking as if the ground was being compressed. A mountain rose with a rumble. I said, let there be rivers. The ground shook again, and a huge stream of water sprayed out from a crack, gradually forming a large river. I said, let there be girls. The metal chain scuttled to the air near where Renbochin was, twisted its slender body, and seemed to be looking for Renbochin. Well, there really wasn't any. After that, Renbochin tested all kinds of things. The surrounding landscape was constantly changing, and the weather was also changing. One moment, there was a storm, and the next second, the strong wind blew away the rain clouds. The sky was clear again, and after a few minutes, it started to snow heavily. As long as Renbochin wanted to, he could almost achieve it. Except for girls. On a plain, there was a huge stone tablet with the words, 9 years of compulsory education, written on it in big, bold, and beautiful characters. That's right, I'm that outstanding. Subsequently, stone tablets were erected one after another, forming a forest of tablets. Densely packed words appeared on each stone tablet. If someone were to look at the stone tablet, they would see the words, Junior High School Physics Book 1, Junior High School Physics Book 2, Junior High School Chemistry Book 1. The densely packed words were the entire content of each book. In addition to words, there were also drawings. Renbachien had discovered the first use of this world, a library. As long as it was something that he remembered, he could record it on each stone tablet. In the future, he wouldn't have to worry about forgetting it after reading it. What was that saying again? Boo-boo-gow's lighter, light up wherever you don't know how to. From now on, my mother won't have to worry about my exams anymore. As long as he was willing, he could move all the books in the world here for him to read at any time. After tossing and turning for a long time, Renbachien began to feel tired like a tide. Then, he flew up into the sky and got further and further away. After that, there was only darkness. Ha! Renbachien opened his eyes. This was the feeling of regaining control of his body. He was in reality and not in his mind. Zhao Prince Consort, you're awake. He heard the cheers of a young girl. Renbachien turned his head and saw that it was Hongwon. However, upon seeing his gaze, Hongwon seemed to have thought of something. She blushed and ran away. Renbachien was confused. What kind of reaction was that? Why was she blushing when he glanced at her? An old man stroked his beard and asked, Zhao Prince Consort, it's good that you're awake. Do you feel sore in your waist? Renbachien felt it and found that it was indeed very sore. Yes, what happened? Renbachien asked carefully. Do you feel tinnitus? The old man didn't mention it, so Renbachien didn't realize it. After being reminded, he realized that his ears were indeed buzzing. Do you still feel dizzy? Is your body heavy? What exactly is happening to me? Your condition is already very serious. The old man's words gave Renbachien a shock. Your waist and knees are sore, your legs are weak, your ears are ringing, and your body is emaciated. Zhao Prince Consort, your blood deficiency is very serious. Renbachien was speechless. So, your kidneys are weak. Renbachien was immediately unhappy. Sir Chen, how can you say that? I have practiced virginity for several years, and it has just been my wedding night. How can my kidneys be weak? The old man sneered, took out a small mirror, and shone it at Renbachien. See for yourself. When Renbachien saw the person in the mirror, he was shocked. Was this him? Chapter 844. After the chief of the medical bureau, Chen Baoquan, left, Renbachien felt the condition of his body, then lay on the roof of the bed. Kidney deficiency was real, dual cultivation was real, and he had gained a lot of benefits from his body. However, these didn't interfere with each other. Although it felt weird, no one said that cultivating, dual cultivation, would not cause kidney deficiency, right? Cough, cough. Let's put aside the issue of kidney deficiency for now. Overall, his current physical condition wasn't too bad. Fractures were fractures, and kidney deficiency was still kidney deficiency. Putting aside the issue of kidney deficiency, he couldn't mention it as it would make him sad. Just now, he heard from Chen Baoquan that he hadn't gone out for 3 days and had gained a lot. First of all, the 3 planets in his brain had finally formed, and he didn't know if it was due to dual cultivation. Secondly, he looked like he had lost a lot of weight, and he estimated that he had lost at least 50 kilograms. However, this didn't seem to be a bad thing as his body had become much stronger. Finally, there seemed to be a lot more things in his body that were full of vitality. They were mixed with his chi and blood, constantly nourishing and changing his body while strengthening his chi and blood at the same time. It was as if he had consumed some kind of treasure. This was also the reason why his physical condition wasn't bad at all even though he had lost nearly 50 kilograms. He just didn't understand why these treasures could replenish his chi and blood but not his kidney deficiency. However, he felt that after digesting all these things that were full of vitality in his body, his cultivation level would increase by a notch. While Renbachian was pondering, the Empress appeared in the room. It wasn't until he stopped thinking that he realized that the Empress was staring at him. "Your Majesty. When did you come?" The Empress's gaze drifted away unconsciously. Although she had gone through 3 days of madness, she didn't dare to look at him directly after waking up. Although the two of them were officially husband and wife in every aspect, she still needed some time to adapt to such a change. "You're awake. How do you feel?" It would have been better if the Empress didn't mention this, but when she opened her mouth, Renbachian's face fell. "Your Majesty, you have to take responsibility." The Empress was speechless. "My back hurts. My hip hurts." "Your Majesty, at that time, shut up." The Water Empress's face turned red. Her hand trembled and she almost slapped him. "It has already been 3 days since the day of the wedding. I don't know what the outside world is thinking. How do you expect me to face the entire imperial court?" The Empress didn't allow him to say anything, but she couldn't help but speak up. There was a tinge of complaint in her voice. "Do you want me to testify for Her Majesty?" Renbachian immediately suggested. "What evidence?" The Empress said subconsciously. When she saw the mischievous look on Renbachian's face, she knew that he was teasing her and slapped his arm. Crack! Renbachian, the Empress, it broke again. Renbachian was speechless. Currently, he had achieved small success in the yang boosting technique, and was well versed in the horizontal training technique. This wife, when he thought about the 3 days of madness, he immediately felt that it was worth it. "Call the doctor over." The Empress covered her head with one hand and called out to Hong Wan, who was outside. Renbachian didn't feel that it was a big deal even though his arm was broken. In fact, his coma didn't have much to do with his hip bone breaking. Instead, it was caused by the substance that was full of vitality that the Empress brought back from her body and rushed into his body. "By the way, Your Majesty, how are you feeling? There seems to be a lot of things in my body now." Renbachian suddenly thought about the vitality that flowed from the Empress's body to his body and wondered if she would be affected. The Empress immediately understood what he meant. She calmed herself down and tried to sound as indifferent as possible before saying, "Don't worry about me. My cultivation level is growing too fast, and sometimes it's hard for me to control it. Now, it's much more stable. This dual cultivation technique is also of some use to me. When I'm injured, let's fight for another 300 rounds." Renbachian laughed. The Empress blushed at first. Then, she seemed to have thought of something and cast aside her shyness. She glanced at him coquettishly and asked, "Can you?" Renbachian flew into a rage. "Even though I have a weak kidney, forget it, can we not talk about this?" The medicine in this world had miraculous effects. After resting for a night, Renbachian was able to limp out with the help of a walking stick even though he still couldn't jump around. He was shocked when he passed by the Empress's bedroom. Were things that intense between him and the Empress at that time? Even the bedroom had collapsed. The Empress's face was black when she returned from court. She thought about how many ministers took turns to advise her to control herself as an emperor and not to be greedy for sex. This made her a little mad. Those people were now hanging from the top of the palace walls. From General Hongwu to the 6 ministers, they were hanging in a row. It was a spectacular sight. It was obvious how angry the Empress was at that time. Furthermore, Great Elder Shi Qing's smiling expression made the Empress even more furious. The Empress was seriously considering whether she and Renbaqian should practice dual cultivation technique for another 3 days. Sometimes, the Empress would throw a little tantrum. Seeing Renbaqian in a daze outside the ruins of the bedroom, the Empress's anger dissipated a lot. She felt that no matter how angry she was sometimes, her mood would improve after seeing someone. However, Renbaqian's first sentence put her in a bad mood again. "Your Majesty, was the battle that intense at that time?" Renbaqian pointed at the ruins of the bedroom in amazement with an expression that said, "Your Majesty, you are amazing." Qin Yuan and Hong Wuan looked at Renbaqian awkwardly and didn't know whether to laugh or do something. The Empress immediately raised her eyebrows. "In my opinion, this matter isn't simple. This palace was left behind by the Hao nation. Could there be some kind of secret chamber or treasure vault below that caused the hole below and caused the sudden collapse?" Renbaqian's tone changed, and the Empress couldn't even vent her anger. In fact, what Renbaqian said was true. Just now, he looked around the ruins and felt that many places had caved in. Based on the situation at that time, this was simply impossible. Unless there was a part below that was hollow. However, this palace had been in the hands of the Aboriginals for more than 70 years, and they actually didn't discover the secrets below. The things below the palace of the Hao nation were hidden very deeply. Hearing Renbaqian say this, the Empress was slightly surprised. Yesterday, when she thought about how the main hall was collapsed by the two of them, she felt as if her face was on fire. How could she come over to check? Qin Yuan and Hong Wuan had been circling around the Empress. The other guards were far away, so naturally, they didn't discover this secret. After hearing Renbaqian's words, the Empress flashed to the ruins to check. Although she didn't know much about civil construction, she immediately found something wrong with this hint. "Inform the people to dig this up," the Empress immediately ordered. Chapter 845. The guards in the palace were all at the Kismet heaven level and could lift more than 1,000 kilograms of force with just a lift of their hands. They could almost be used as human excavators, and the ruins of the palace were quickly cleaned up. The broken wooden pillars and the long stones used to build the palace were thrown aside by 2 people standing on either side. The only troublesome thing was the broken tiles, which were the most time-consuming to clean up. When Renbaqian went to court the next morning energetically, the ruins were still being cleaned up. In the past, whenever Renbaqian wanted to attend court, he would first wait outside the palace and attend court with everyone else. However, when he was about to leave this time, the Empress asked in surprise, "It's almost time for the court meeting. Where are you going?" "Outside the palace." Renbaqian couldn't react. The Empress supported her chin with her fingers and looked at him with a smile. "Now that your status is different and you are already a prince, you can come with me." "Is that so?" Renbaqian thought about it and couldn't think of anyone who had told him about this. Even in ancient China, the Empress wasn't qualified to attend court. This made his status seem special. "If I say so," the Empress said casually. In any case, there was no precedent in this area, so what she said was the law. This was the first time Renbaqian followed the Empress to the morning court assembly. He was half a step behind and could see the side of the Empress's face if he tilted his head slightly. During the court assembly, the Empress's face was always filled with indifference. As he walked, Renbaqian's thoughts began to go astray. With the Empress as a precedent in Dayo and the difficulty of reproduction among the Aboriginals, there might be a female emperor in the future. In the future, he had to remember to leave a rooster to rule the court and that princes were not allowed to interfere in court affairs. After all, not every prince was like him, who was well versed in both literature and martial arts and had no desire for power. "What are you thinking about?" the Empress suddenly asked without looking back. Renbochin thought for a while and said, "In 10 days, we will get married again on Earth. I hope there won't be any trouble." "You still dare to bring up trouble? Who dares to cause trouble again?" The Empress's face turned cold. The wedding was messed up by a few bastards, and she still hadn't settled the score with them. Renbochin smiled. He wasn't afraid of anything on Earth as long as the Empress didn't cause trouble. When they were outside the hall, they could hear the clamor of the market. In any case, it didn't seem possible to expect these fellows to attend the court quietly and solemnly. It was already good enough that they didn't fight before the Empress arrived. "His Majesty has arrived." Everyone finally quietened down. The Empress paused for a moment. If those people were to see Renbochin's current appearance, she would be too ashamed to face them. However, he couldn't possibly not see anyone, right? Forget it. Gritting his teeth, he strode into the hall and walked straight to the very top before sitting down. As expected, a series of gasps could be heard behind the Empress. A few days ago, Renbochin looked quite normal. How did he become so skinny after not seeing him for a few days? This caused many people to gasp. The Empress's eyebrows twitched a few times, but she suppressed it. There was no other way. No matter what, she had something to do with the fact that Renbochin was so skinny. She disdained to explain herself. Of course, she couldn't explain herself either. Renbochin landed behind the Empress. Along the way, he received gasps of cold air and winks from the crowd. When he passed by his original position, he paused for a moment, looked up, and saw Great Elder Shurqing pointing to his side, the position closest to the Empress. The number 1 person below the Empress. Opposite them was the great general who supports the nation, Hong Wu, who was neither arrogant nor arrogant. In fact, Renbochin should be standing in Hong Wu's position. In terms of status, Shurqing was slightly higher than Hong Wu. However, looking at Hong Wu's expression, Renbochin decided not to get close to him. Fortunately, the rules in Dao's imperial court weren't that strict. If they were strict, it couldn't be like a market every day. Renbochin faced everyone's gaze and then sat down like an old monk. After standing there for a moment, he simply let go of his thoughts and carefully felt the current condition of his body. His body was recovering very quickly. After 2 days, the substances that were full of vitality had only decreased a little. The remaining substances mixed with his essence energy and slowly circulated and decomposed like star sand. These substances seemed to be of a higher quality than his essence energy. Not only were they gradually changing his body, but there were also traces of them being converted into essence energy. The conversion rate was at least 1/10. During the morning court session, Renbochin spent almost the entire time standing there and studying the condition of his body. At noon, he went to the ruins of the palace and saw that more than half of the rubble had been cleared. He could clearly see that the stone slabs that were originally laid on the ground had sunk by more than a meter and were shattered everywhere. After another day, Renbochin felt that his body had completely recovered. Other than losing close to 50 kilograms, there weren't any other effects. In fact, he was even better than before. This made Renbochin feel restless again. He used to think that the pleasure in bed was limited, but with the Empress, it was exceptionally different. The feeling of the fusion of the soul and flesh, the circulation of essence energy in both of their bodies, and the feeling of being connected as one wasn't something that ordinary pleasure in bed could compare to. He couldn't forget about it. However, he still had to drink the tamkin nourishing soup for half a month. It was said that there was a person called Li Xianyu who relied on this soup to indulge in pleasure every day. Then, he died of exhaustion. There was no other way. Even a body made of iron couldn't take it. However, he obtained this soup at the age of 20 and indulged in pleasure every day until he was 30, which could be considered a miracle. The effect was indeed much better than the 6-flavor Rehmannia pill. Just as Rinpoche was preparing to recuperate in the palace for half a month, the embroidered uniform guards requested to see him. Rinpoche met them in an originally abandoned palace hall. There were 2 tall trees in front of the hall that blocked most of the windows. The hall was rather cold and gloomy, and the Empress had always disliked it. However, Rinpoche felt that it was quite suitable for a commander of secret agents to meet his subordinates. Subordinate Su Rong, Ping Tang, greets your highness. The 2 men entered the hall with their heads lowered and didn't even dare to breathe loudly. This hall made the 2 of them feel cold and gloomy. They stole a glance forward and saw a man sitting high above. His face was almost shrouded in shadows. Although the other party didn't emit any pressure, the atmosphere in this hall made the 2 of them feel pressured, and they didn't dare to act rashly. Rinpoche looked down from his seat of honor. He had some impression of Su Rong, who was currently a Chinhu in the rearguard commandery. As for Ping Tang, he was a Baihu. Rinpoche didn't know why the 2 of them were so anxious to see him. Tell me, what's the matter? Rinpoche asked while holding a cup of nourishing soup. Su Rong gave Ping Tang a look, and the latter lowered his head and recounted what he had heard at the banquet in the palace that day. After that, he kept his mouth shut. Rinpoche narrowed his eyes. Should he say that these people were audacious or that they didn't know what was good for them? Not only were they behaving with their tails between their legs, but they even dared to spout nonsense. Have you found out their identities? Rinpoche asked. Su Rong replied, yes. One is Jiang Biabu, the second son of Jiang Huan, the warlord of Yongjiang City, and the other is Sun Qingwen, the eldest son of Sun Shi, the warlord of Hu City. After that, he added, I also have to report to your highness that in addition to these 2, there are more than 10 people who also spoke disrespectfully in private. Well done. Give me the list of names in a while. Rinpoche nodded slightly. After all, the rearguard commandery wasn't the embroidered uniform guards or the east and west depots of China. There were only a few thousand official personnel in the rearguard commandery, and most of them were in Tianjin Basin. This time, they could even find out what the people of the Yun nation were saying in private, which was really good. Su Rong hesitated and said, in addition, there is another matter that involves your highness and her majesty. Even though it's disrespectful, you must know about it. Speak. Rinpoche's expression turned cold. This matter is about Lin Mengxing, who has made great contributions to the Yun nation. Rumor has it that his goal is to get close to Her Majesty. There is no solid evidence for this matter, and it's all private discussions among the people of the Yun nation. I feel that I should inform your highness. Su Rong lowered his head. He thought that since this matter involved Rinpoche's status, Rinpoche would definitely be furious. However, to his surprise, Rinpoche's voice was very calm. Got it. Give me the list of names in a while and continue to do your own things. I will get someone to record your contributions this time. Yes, thank you, your highness. A moment later, Rinpoche leaned on the couch and gently tapped his temple with one hand. Lin Mengxing. This guy really had foresight and took the initiative to express his feelings to him. However, Rinpoche didn't know what he was thinking and had to be observed in the future. However, Rinpoche didn't feel that he would really be threatened by anyone. A woman like the Empress could only love one person in her life. Once she fell in love, she would never change her mind unless she let him down. He looked down at the list on the paper. The names, origins, and what they said were all in it. Rinpoche sneered. These idiots really didn't know what was good for them. He put the paper in his pocket and sat for a while before leaving the hall. The sunlight immediately shone on him, causing him to squint his eyes. He still preferred the warmth of the sun. It was much more comfortable. Chapter 846. Ren Lijun had been in a good mood recently. Even when he was walking, he would hum a tune. At his age, he had long passed the age of knowing his destiny. He did not have many thoughts about the future. All he wanted was for his children to be successful, to enjoy life in old age, to be healthy, and finally to have grandchildren. Needless to say, there was no need to worry about his two sons. He did not know how to evaluate his eldest son. Originally, he looked like an ordinary person from every angle. Even when compared to his friends, colleagues, relatives, and neighbors, he was not the kind of person who was amazing. However, starting 10 years ago, he suddenly could not understand him. Now, he was not very clear what his eldest son was doing or how many properties he had. However, he knew that his eldest son owned a 5-square-kilometer property in Wuji City, which completely belonged to him. Just this property alone could be said to be enough for him to squander in several lifetimes. Now, his eldest son could be said to be extremely envious of his relatives and friends, and they would give him a thumbs up. As for his youngest son, he was also busy with his eldest son, so he did not have to worry at all. He did not have to worry about his two sons at all. All that was left was to enjoy life and be healthy. Needless to say, having a harmonious family was a blessing, not to mention having money. As for health, ever since he started practicing the 15th set of broadcast Qigong 6 or 7 years ago, and with the herbs and food that his eldest son would send back from time to time, he had not even caught a cold these years. His body was even better than when he was young. Now, the only thing he was missing was grandchildren. Those around his age already had grandchildren. It would be a lie to say that he was not envious of them. His two sons were quite promising, but he didn't even have a grandchild. Because of this, he worried a lot. After waiting for so many years, his eldest son was finally going to get married. Ever since the news came back, he had not been able to close his mouth. Today, he came back from his son's new house. Although his son did not live here, he still bought a house and renovated it just for this day. "Old Ren, you came back from the new house again." Before entering the corridor, he met the upstairs neighbor. Usually, smoking was not allowed at home, so they all came to the corridor to smoke. They were very friendly with each other. "Yeah," Ren Lijun said with a smile. "When are you getting married?" "In a month." "That's fast. Let me know if you need any help. Don't forget to come to the wedding." "I won't forget." "Hey, one of them is your son, right?" While they were chatting, the neighbor upstairs suddenly said. Even though he had only seen her twice, he would never forget her. That body was like a human bear. It was too oppressive. Ren Lijun turned his head and looked. Sure enough, there were 4 people walking over from afar. 3 of them were tall and strong like moving city walls. The last one was strong but much thinner. Wasn't that his son? "Dad, you're chatting." Ren Baqian nodded at them and smiled. "You've lost weight. How did you lose so much weight?" Ren Lijun felt a little distressed. His son had been thin since he was a child. It wasn't easy for him to gain weight in the past few years. The neighbor upstairs almost spat. Thin. He was 1.75 meters tall and weighed at least 100 kilograms. The muscles all over his body bulged, making his t-shirt look like it was about to explode. Do you have any misunderstandings about the word thin? But compared to before, he had indeed lost a lot of weight. It had degraded from a city wall to a concrete block. To lose weight. Ren Baqian replied casually. He couldn't possibly say that he was squeezed dry, right? There was no way to say that. Old Lou, let's go up. Papa Ren greeted the neighbor next door and the three-winged cavalry warriors before leading them upstairs. How long are you staying this time? I'll stay for 5 days. After that, I have to run some errands and will be back in 20 days. Papa Ren knew that his son had a lot on his plate now and didn't mind. Where's my wife? She's too busy to leave. Come back with me when the time comes. When they entered the house, they saw that the house was filled with red wedding bedding, double happiness, and a bunch of other things were piled up in the living room. His mother and 2 aunts were thinking about what else they hadn't bought. Naturally, there was no more conventional greetings. This time, Renbochin came back mainly to look at the wedding process and eliminate everything that shouldn't be there to avoid any trouble. Although the Empress said that she had a sense of propriety and etiquette, Renbochin didn't dare to listen to her. This wedding was completely for his parents to see. He didn't plan to do much and just wanted it to be simple. The guests were also relatives and friends of his parents. Almost everything was arranged by his parents from start to finish. It was the same for the wedding planner, which was said to be quite famous locally. The next day, Renbochin went straight to the wedding planner, got the process, sat on the sofa, and crossed out the items one by one. Change this one to bowing 3 times. Change it to a fist salute. Remove this one. Remove this one to offer tea. Remove this one where the bride promises to live in harmony with her parents-in-law. Remove this one to offer dates, peanuts, longans, and lotus seeds, and then ask the bride if she wants to give birth. Remove this one to greet parents, guests, and husband and wife. Change it to a fist salute. Remove this one about love stories and truth or dare. Remove this one about guest speaking. Remove this one about the bride and groom speaking. Remove this one about the bride pouring wine for her relatives. Renbochin was glad that he came to take a look. There were too many minefields. Let the Empress promise to live in harmony with her parents. He. Put a pile of dates, peanuts, longans, and lotus seeds, and then the Empress will sit on them and ask her if she wants to give birth. He. Bow 90 degrees to greet parents, guests, and husband and wife. He. If the Empress were to give face and bow to her parents, she would flip the table if she did anything else. What kind of game was this? Truth or dare? Each of them would write down the most mushy thing, the happiest thing, the most unforgettable thing, the most touching thing, the most favorite thing about him or her, the first kiss, and so on. While writing, the 2 of them had to be separated temporarily. Then, the paper would be handed to the MC and they would have to guess what the other party would write. He. Asking the Empress to play this game in public. They must have lived long enough. However, it would be good to play this game in the bedroom with the Empress. He didn't know what the Empress would write. Not to mention the Empress, even he didn't know what to write. He would play it when he got back. It seemed pretty fun. As for the bride's speech, what if the Empress said, "I will grant you the title of king for generations"? Would they be afraid? Let alone asking the Empress to pour wine and light the wedding cigarettes for her relatives. Who would dare to imagine that scene? These were all goddamn minefields. One step on them and they would die. Renbochin wanted to laugh at the wedding planner company. However, he also knew that these wedding planner companies were dealing with normal people, and he was the abnormal kind. There was no other person like him on earth, so they couldn't be blamed. After he finished speaking, the boss of the wedding planner company was speechless. The boss of the wedding planner company had some prestige and was quite knowledgeable. If he met other people, he could still maintain his authoritative status. After all, this was the custom of marriage in this world. However, Renbochin had great power. Even though he was sitting there and speaking calmly, he was imposing and couldn't be refused. With 3 fierce-looking walls standing behind him, the boss opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. Let's do it this way. You can think of other ways. In any case, don't do anything new and follow the procedures that I approve of. Renbochan threw the paper back on the coffee table and heaved a sigh of relief. This way, there shouldn't be any problems. All that was left was to get a few relatives of the bride. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.